start with some sunshine, but the breeze will strengthen in the southwest on Thursday, and we will see some outbreaks of rain coming in here. They're likely to drift northwards into parts of Wales by Thursday afternoon. Still some patchy rain across Orkney, but much of Scotland brighter on Thursday, and sunny spells again in the east. Again with a breeze off the North Sea, quite fresh feeling here. Further south, temperatures once more in the mid or even high teens.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith.
Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Buckingham Palace as we build up for the coronation this Saturday. I've got loads of royal news for you today. We're going to be talking about Princess Anne slapping down people saying that we need a streamlined monarchy. She says no, and I think we're all the better for it as well. What's going on with Kate's floral headdress? Shouldn't she be getting out the old proper tiaras? Is that a sign of the monarchy in decline? And are you proud to be British and of Britain's national history? Certainly a lot of people are, but I think we should be even prouder. I've got all of this coming your way and a host of other news stories as well. It's not just the royals today, right here as we gear up on GB News for the coronation. Yes, well, I will be joined throughout the course of the show by a whole host of top royal guests. I've also been out and about talking to the great British public, and the crowds are building up behind me here, as you can see, the people camping out. So we're going to be talking to all of those people and getting a flavour about where the public stand on this. What are they excited about in the run-up to this? Do they think that we should be having more of a streamlined monarchy? Are they happy to pay for the one that we've got? And as well, what is going on with Kate's floral headdress? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I'll have loads more coming your way as well, not just the royal news, but right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Our top story on GB News today: more than 1 million NHS staff in England will receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be implemented. Members of the NHS Staff Council said that the unions agreed to the deal for staff, which includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. The Royal College of Nursing and Unite voted against the pay deal. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers and urges the unions to accept the offer.
It's a good day for NHS staff, but it's also a good day for patients. It will allow us to move forward. Now the NHS Staff Council has ratified this deal. It's been accepted by the majority of the NHS Staff Council, and we can now move forward, focus together on the patients, and also ensure that staff get the pay rise much sooner than would have been the case under the pay review body process.
Meanwhile, a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others gave emotional testimony today during her first time in the witness stand. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court for the offences alleged to have taken place between June 2015 and June 2016. Our North West reporter Sophie Reaper was in court.
Today, former nurse Lucy Letby has given evidence for the very first time in this trial. A jury here at Manchester Crown Court heard the former nurse questioned about her life leading up to becoming a nurse and then the accusations that came in September of 2016. She told the court that her job was her life and that she'd always wanted to work with children. She said, "I'm there to help and to care, not to harm."
Well, in other news today, the former US President Donald Trump is in Turnberry in Scotland visiting one of his golf resorts. On Monday, he opened a new course named after his late mother at Meany Estate near Aberdeen. His trip coincides with a visit to the UK last week by one of his likely rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, Ron DeSantis. And tomorrow, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage will be interviewing Donald Trump from his golf estate in Turnberry in Scotland. That's live here on GB News at 7 o'clock. Now, teachers across England are striking today in an ongoing pay dispute, with hundreds marching outside the Department of Education. In April, members of the National Education Union overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer. The NEU, along with 3 other teaching unions, has rejected an offer which included a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.3% pay rise for most staff by September. Today's walkout is the 5th undertaken by educators this year, causing major disruption. Labour MP for Leeds East, Richard Bergen, says striking is a last resort.
What we're seeing is people fighting back because they've got no choice. And there are ways to fund this. For example, just equalising capital gains tax with income tax, which used to be the case even for a period under Thatcher's government in the 80s, would raise more than enough money to give every single public sector worker in this country an inflation-matching pay rise. So the money is there. The government doesn't seem to have the right priorities because the government should be putting our public services and working people across this country first, and I'm afraid they're not.
In business news, oil giant BP is reporting stronger than expected profits in the first 3 months of 2023, reaching close to £4 billion. The result was a reduction from the £4.96 billion that BP made in the same quarter last year, but well ahead of the £3.44 billion that analysts had expected it to make. Now, as you've been hearing, Princess Anne says she believes King Charles will not be changed by his new role as monarch. Talking with the Canadian broadcaster CBC ahead of the coronation, Princess Anne said the King, her brother, like the rest of the family, is committed to public service. But the Princess Royal argued that slimming down the royal family doesn't sound like a good idea to her. In response to reports, the King may reduce the number of working members of the royal family and their staff.
Well, you know what you're getting because he's been practising for a bit. And I don't think he'll change. You know, he is committed to his own level of service, and that will remain true.
The Princess Royal speaking there. Now, councils in England have approved more than 3,000 road closures for street parties during His Majesty's coronation. The most popular day for the royal celebration is thought to be Sunday, when 62% of festivities will take place. According to the Platform One network, these street parties will cover a total of 263 miles. That's a lot of tablecloths. And King Charles's coronation is expected to provide a £120 million boost to pubs across the UK. The British Beer and Pub Association says local pubs and breweries are planning to pour 62 million pints over the bank holiday weekend. Pubs will be allowed to stay open as well until 1 a.m. You with GB News? More news in half an hour. See you then.
Yes, well, welcome along, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here with GB News, and as you can see, I am indeed at Buckingham Palace. I will be here all throughout the week as we count down to Saturday's huge event. And, well, we start today with a big interview with Princess Anne, many people's favourite royal, and I think she's proving exactly why. She said that the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy, well, it's not a good one. She's slapped them down, hasn't she? And she was reacting to reports that King Charles III could now actually reduce the number of working royals.
Oh, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
I'm sure it does
I'm
not.
not quite sure what else, you know.
Well, I'm going to be talking about all of this throughout the course of the show. This is a big one for me today, about whether or not the royal family essentially should be slimmed down. Is it value for money? What do they contribute? As we, of course, gear up to the coronation. And I have been out and about talking to people as well. You can see the crowds behind me here. There very much is an atmosphere building. People camping just over there. I'll be talking to some of those really proud royalists and patriots a little bit later on in the show. But right now, here with me at our fabulous Buckingham Palace studio is the one and only David Starkey, historian extraordinaire. David, how are you?
I'm very well.
Now, what do you make of Princess Anne's comments there about us definitely not streamlining the royal family? What she said was she doesn't think there's much more they can do.
I mean, I think it's an extraordinary shot across the bows of her brother immediately before the coronation. I mean, was it coordinated? I mean, you know, this is a very unusual thing. A long royal interview like that is something they do very rarely. And in a sense, directly to contradict what has been the main thrust of this slimmed-down, modernised monarchy, which her brother has been talking about ever since he was Prince of Wales. I think the clue may be in another remark that she said, which hasn't really been picked up on, which is that when he first made that remark, there were more of us, she said.
Well, that's it, and I think that's a really important point, that, David, because I was talking to people before. We'll play you some clips of that later on. But the primary thing they were saying to me was, well, what does it really mean to slim it down? Where is the fat that we can cut off?
Well, indeed, the monarchy at the moment depends on three people in their 80s, along with the ones we're familiar with, the Duke of Gloucester, the Duke of Kent, and Princess Alexandra. I mean, Princess Alexandra was somebody that my mother, who died in 1977, thought was lovely, and the poor woman is still at it. And doing it beautifully with her grace and elegance, but it can't go on.
No.
And the trouble is, we are missing a generation. That's to say that OK, the Prince and Princess of Wales, but their children are very young. George is just about old enough to carry out the job of a page carrying a train, not to do an opening of a big event. Because, again, I think the king has got himself into a bind. He wants the monarchy to be more active. He wants to encourage people to volunteer. He wants more charities. But each one of them needs a royal. It needs a patron. It needs somebody there. It needs somebody to go and open, to shake hands.
Well, and they've lost a couple of them. It's worth noting as well that Princess Anne is widely regarded as the hardest working royal.
She is.
There you go.
She is.
Exactly. Something like, I was doing every now and again, I do a little bit of research before I come on now, and she was doing something like 240 engagements last year alone, which is amazing, really, when you think about it. So she's obviously in a position, I think, of real authority when it comes to saying, well, I don't really think you should be trimming it down anymore. There were a couple of people I was talking to out and about earlier on who were saying, well, I wouldn't really mind if we weren't paying in any way, shape or form for Prince Harry or Andrew, are we?
No.
Right.
In no direct way are we. And I think it's really important, as they're not working royals, they do not get in what used to be called the civil list. On the other hand, the king does have very substantial semi-private resources, the Duchy of Lancaster and so on, and there's a discretionary use, I suppose, of what's now called the sovereign grant.
Yes, well, talk to me a bit about that, because that is what a lot of people bang on about when they go, well, hang on a minute, we're in a cost of living crisis. Look at this massive house behind me now. We'll see him in some kind of gold carriage on Coronation Day. All of this land that they own, the royal family, they are wadded. Why are we paying for them?
Well, they are wadded in one sense and they're not in another. That's to say, the Crown estates, they do not directly control. They are run by a special commission. But what Charles did when he was Prince of Wales was to spearhead a different way of dealing with it. Now they get a percentage of profits. And remember, the Crown Estate is brilliantly run. It generates enormous... It owns huge slices of central London. So what you're doing is you're creaming a section of the profits for the royal family. It doesn't come out of general taxation. It's not money, as it were, would otherwise go to the NHS. It's ring-fenced special money that's essentially profit of the land, profit of the London property market.
And the Treasurer does actually make money from the royal family. This is the thing. I mean, the estimates vary, and it depends very much, of course, on which estimates that you do read, but somewhere in the region of around 500 million quid a year, the taxpayer is actually in profit, I believe.
You mean actually from the Crown Estate?
Yes.
Yeah, I think considerably more.
Right.
I mean, its yield is enormous.
Yeah.
Also, of course, there's the whole business that we're seeing now. That's to say, the extraordinary prominence of tourism, the number of people who come to London, particularly because of this. But I think there's something else that we should really be talking about, which is this. It really is your third point, our history.
Yes.
The monarchy is the central thread of our history. It's the only institution, apart from the Church of England, that goes right back to the beginning. Do you know, this is the 1050th anniversary of the first royal coronation in England. The first coronation of a King of England in 973. 1,500 years. There are so few institutions of which that's true. And I think the other thing, remember I know this sounds an odd thing to say, this is modern TV and whatever. Our ancestors took a decision. We undid a revolution. Once upon a time we did what lots of people want to do. We got rid of royalty and we decided we wanted it back.
Fantastic. Look, David's going to be joining me throughout the course of this show. He's made some cracking points there. So the top one there, Princess Anne, right to say that we shouldn't strip back the monarchy anymore. We've done it as much as we can and it's making us all money. So I think we can agree that it's worth it. I am, when I come back, going to be talking about Kate's dodgy tiara, if you want to call it that. Apparently it's got flowers, not jewels in it. What's going on there? And that national history point as well. I will reveal to you how many Brits are actually proud of our national history. And guess what? It's not as many as you might think. Patrick, Christys at the Palace.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wow, well, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. It's Patrick Christys here at Buckingham Palace as GB News is the home of your coronation coverage. We're going to have the absolute lot of it today, ladies and gents. We've got a whole host of royal guests and we're hitting the top royal topics. You will have just heard us talking about the reasons why Princess Anne is absolutely right to slap down people who think that we should have a more streamlined monarchy. It's about as streamlined as you can get it, and it's already giving us more money than the royals are taking from us. But here's another one for you today that caught my eye. Let's turn to, well, I think it's a major talking point ahead of this particular coronation anyway, and that is, will the Princess of Wales wear a tiara on Saturday? Or will she go for a floral headpiece instead? Now, this, of course, is a question I ask myself most Saturday evenings. But it's reported that Kate could decide to wear a crown of flowers instead of a tiara, which would be a major break with tradition. Now, GB News viewers can see 2 images of Kate. One where she's got a tiara on, and the other one, rather more relaxed setting, when she was in the Solomon Islands in 2012 with a floral number. Now, quite a few people might be saying, well, does it all really matter? But for those people who are desperate to have the full show and the pomp and ceremony and don't want the royal family to be cutting costs on things like that, I think it might be a bit of a disappointment. David Starkey is still with me. David, what on earth is going on? Why won't she get a proper tiara on?
I don't understand it at all. I mean, on the other hand, remember, in the middle of the coronation invitation, I'm sure you've got yours in your pocket.
Actually, yes.
There's a little green, in fact, rather large green man at the bottom. This sort of sense of nature worship. And I suppose, in one sense, yes, flowers in the hair, you know, relaxed in communion with nature. I think it's a daft idea, frankly.
Yeah.
That remember, they have some of the world's most incomparably valuable and beautiful jewellery. Normally, it sits in a cupboard. Normally, it sits in a safe. We want to see it. Again, I'll be truthful. I'm disappointed I'm not seeing the Koh-i-Noor. I feel a little bit deprived. It has an amazing flashing effect. Luckily, the Cullinan diamonds that are in the consort's crown are pretty good too. But remember, the pomp and circumstance of monarchy is part of the show.
Absolutely.
The coronation is grand opera. It should be grand opera in this extraordinary building built for the purpose on this amazing marble pavement, which only a handful survive in the world, with wonderful music, choirs. I mean, robes of cloth of gold.
Yeah.
You want all that because it's part of the show. Yeah. I'm really sorry, for example, that we no longer have the peers, like a Gilbert and Sullivan chorus, all in scarlet with their golden coronets. And again, it's a wonderful moment of theatre. Being a bit more serious. Do you remember going back to the Queen's funeral? The things that everybody remembers are the crown coming off the coffin and the breaking of the wand. These symbols are very powerful. We will not see the most powerful symbol of the old coronation, which was when the moment the king had his crown put on, all the nobles put their crowns on too. It's theatre. And in a sense, the modernising strips away that essence. Monarchy is ceremony. What's the point of it otherwise?
Well, exactly. And the point is, we already own this stuff. We know that the royal family owns it. Yes, well, I should be very clear about that. I don't own it. Otherwise, let's be honest, we wouldn't be here, would we? But no, the royal family already owns all of this stuff. So there's no idea that they're going to go out and just buy it and that's going to be an additional expense. We know that. And it could be argued, David, could it not, that one of the key points about owning it is that the public, the great unwashed like me, get to see the flipping thing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the stuff is there to be used. And again, you've got a setting in Westminster Abbey which is designed for this, 800 years ago, with thought, with care, designed to be seen. Where we are now, this is entirely laid out at the beginning of the 20th century for a royal show. In other words, frankly, if you just piddle your way along, what is the point?
This is it. And I can't help but wonder whether or not they've given in to some, well, actually, Republicans who would be all over them like a rash. We all know, don't we, in the gossip rags, you see, oh, what's she wearing? What's the outfit worth? Where did they get that from? And that's one thing. But someone would be doing a blow-by-blow account of every single cost of every single stone that was in a particular tiara. And I just wonder whether or not they've caved into people who would see it as an ostentatious show of wealth. And I unfortunately think, David, that they've caved into a minority there.
Do you know what? They're on a completely losing game. I think it's a... Do you remember Radio 2? Every so often, Radio 2 decided it wanted people even younger than you are.
Wow.
So what you do is you sack all the presenters, you sack all the disc jockeys, you change all the music, you lose the audience you've got already, and you don't get a new one. When the monarchy plays the woke or the Republican game, it's lose-lose.
And on that exact point, I'm going to return to Princess Anne. I have always loved Princess Anne. I think the vast majority of us absolutely do. And she gave a big sit-down interview. And on that woke stuff, David, she said something really important. Now, we know that King Charles has, for whatever reason, agreed to cooperate with some kind of ridiculous slavery investigation that's going on in the royal family and a historic link to the slave trade. And Princess Anne said she wouldn't have, well, she alluded to, I don't want to put words in her mouth, she alluded to the fact that she absolutely wouldn't have entertained this stuff, and history is history.
She is absolutely right, of course. The idea that the royal family is anything to apologise for is infinitely stupid. The Guardian, that dredger through muck that has just published an anti-Semitic cartoon that is literally a mound of filth. Do you know what he was able to find? That I think it was the king's great-great-great-great-grandfather
1689.
on the side of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, in other words, not even the royal side of the family, did have something to do with the slave trade at one point. Now, do you know who the kind of people who dredged through people's past like that were? They were called the Nazis.
Right.
They were going through to find out whether you got a Jewish father, grandfather, grandmother. And what the anti-slavery lot are doing now is reproducing that. They're trying to come up with this terrible idea of hereditary guilt, that we are somehow to blame for previous generations. There's only one thing peculiar about Britain and slavery. We are the only country that decided it was wicked and illegal. What you forget, Patrick, is that slavery wasn't even thought wrong. Now, we take for granted everybody who was a slaver must have realised they were wicked. This is not true. There's nothing against slavery in the Bible. I mean, St. Paul says, slaves should be obedient to their masters. Masters should treat their slaves kindly. There's nothing saying it's wicked. There are rules governing it. So the people of the 18th century didn't know it was wrong.
And I suppose there, then, the argument is that the royal family moved with the times and really had nothing to apologise for, because if they were apologising for it, then everyone would be apologising for it.
They've actually moved ahead of the times.
Right.
In 1840, the man who really is his great-great-grandfather, in other words, Prince Albert, led the resistance, led the campaign to continue the abolition of slavery, because, of course, it's abolished in the British Empire, but it's not abolished worldwide. And the whole weight of the Royal Navy, from the 1840s right through the 19th century, at a huge cost, some 2% of GDP, is devoted to eradicating slavery, because the really big slave powers are places we don't think of it. Portugal, Brazil, and above all, the Ottoman Empire. And what was going on, the Brits at every level, through the Navy and in Africa, were deliberately campaigning to suppress slavery.
And, talking of this history, OK, that we're going to be doing a lot on, there's a wonderful crowd of people behind me here. And can I just say thank you very much as well to everyone. I was doing a little bit of a walk around before, and I was surveying the nation a bit and going and just soaking up the atmosphere. And so many of you coming up and saying hello. And it's been great to see you all. Get yourselves down here, because we will be here, of course, all the way through, right through to the coronation. I will be here until Friday. And I just want to meet as many of you as possible. A little bit later on, I'm going to be having a chat, fingers crossed, with a lady called Anita, who is, superfan doesn't quite do it justice for Anita, bless her, but she's going to be camping out. We spoke to a few of those people yesterday who've been camping out, and I'm going to be talking to her, hopefully, a little bit later on in the show, and continue this conversation with David Starkey, but knows the next chat on Britain's national history. Some new polling data came out, and it showed that around 44% of people think that we should be proud of Britain's national history, which of course isn't an overt majority, but apparently only around 22% were saying that we shouldn't be. So there's a lot of squishy middle ground there. And I just wonder why you are proud, if you are, of Britain's national history, and do you think more should be done to make more people even prouder? But I have lots more ahead of Saturday's coronation for you very, very shortly, right here on GB News at the Palace. But I want to get to another one of today's big stories, and at the heart of that story is Sue Gray. So we're delving from the royals and we're back into politics now. She is the former civil servant whose report into Partygate contributed to the downfall of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Well, she is now set to become Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, but there are allegations that when she was advising the parliamentary investigation into lockdown breaches at Downing Street, she was already holding talks with Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. Now, if that's true, and it is a big if, then she would have broken parliamentary rules. And that is absolutely massive. That was the big question at the time. Well, I'm very pleased to say that I'm now joined by Tom Harwood, who's our Deputy Political Editor. Tom, is this as fishy as it smells?
Well, we don't have long to wait. We're expecting a statement from the Cabinet Office Minister in the House of Commons in the next couple of hours. And this should, if everything that we understand to be true is going ahead, this should give us some very, very big clues into what is happening. There's been an investigation into Sue Gray's conduct, into whether or not she's broken the Civil Service Code of Conduct. And when this investigation was announced by the Cabinet Office Minister, it really did seem a pretty open and shut case. In order for Sue Gray to have taken on this job with the Labour Party, she will have obviously needed to have discussions with the Labour Party. But the Civil Service Code of Conduct says senior civil servants cannot have meetings with opposition parliamentarians, with opposition parties, unless they have been specifically sanctioned by a relevant minister. Now, no such meetings were sanctioned by ministers, but we today will find out the timing of all of this. The allegation that appears on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today is that whilst Sue Gray was advising the parliamentary investigation into whether Boris Johnson misled the House over Partygate or not, it was during that time that Sue Gray was having these conversations with the Labour team, with Sir Keir Starmer's office. If that's upheld, it could well be that we've seen Mr. Rules, Keir Starmer, the guy who has tried to paint himself as the most steadfast follower of all of these rules, and indeed Sue Gray, the woman who enforced these rules for years at the heart of government. We could well see today that these two individuals have breached those same rules. And that is very important because it could mean a cooling-off period is enforced by the government. What do I mean by that? A period of time whereby Sue Gray is not allowed to take up that post in Keir Starmer's office. It could be a period of time more than a year. It could be a year and a half. It could actually last until the next general election. And if that's the case, then Keir Starmer really does have egg on his face. He looks like he's been fiddly with the rules, but also he doesn't get the expertise of Sue Gray advising his team in any potential preparations for Downing Street, which is why ostensibly she was sought out and hired. He wouldn't get any of that until he actually got into Downing Street. So that's a potential outcome of today, but as I say, not so long now to wait.
No, and Tom, just quickly, I just want to drill down because it's easy to get lost in all the royal news because we are, of course, here at Buckingham Palace. But how long do we think we'll have to wait, and just exactly how might we be able to get that information, essentially? Because I do want to build up to this here. I think it's going to be big for a lot of people at home who thought that there might have been something a little bit, untoward going on. Remains to be proven, of course, in relation to Sue Gray and Keir Starmer. And again, just quickly, Tom, what would it potentially mean for the old Partygate investigation that did for Boris Johnson, one of the most democratically elected prime ministers we've ever had?
Well, it is true to say Boris Johnson won a higher share of the vote than even Tony Blair won in 1997. Boris Johnson won the highest share of the vote of any party since the 1970s in that 2019 election. However, I think it's very, very important to make a distinction here between what is being investigated and what isn't. There were two Partygate investigations. The first one while Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, the second while Boris Johnson was a backbench MP, but into how he behaved in Parliament. The allegation today is that Sue Gray was talking to Labour during the second one rather than the first one. So I don't think this is going to have any direct implications on that investigation. But there are many people who will think, hang on, if this woman, this senior so-called impartial civil servant, was so quick, so happy to jump into the arms of the official opposition, what really was she thinking through those years in government? Was she really being this impartial arbiter of the Partygate process even before she started speaking with Keir Starmer and his team? Now, on your question of timing, Parliament is not the most rigorous institution in terms of sticking to an absolute timetable. It does depend a little bit on how long debates last, but I can tell you this afternoon, it is on the order paper that the Cabinet Office Minister will be making a written ministerial statement at the dispatch box. We'll keep our eye on the House of Commons and let you know when that is taking place.
Great stuff. OK, so fingers crossed we will have a bit of breaking news and potentially some big breaking news right here live on this show. Tom Harwood, excellent stuff, our Deputy Political Editor there. Now, I have got loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen, so make sure you don't take your eyes off this show. There are growing calls now, and I must say I've shifted my position on this, actually. I think it's almost becoming indefensible. Growing calls for a windfall tax after BP reported yet more whopping great big profit. And, as well, we will hear from the royal superfans who are flocking to Buckingham Palace a full 4 days before the coronation. I'll be going out and about and chatting to those wonderful, glorious people. But right now, it's your headlines with the even more glorious Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. More than 1 million NHS staff in England are going to receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be implemented. Members of the NHS Staff Council said that the unions agreed to the deal for staff, and it includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. The Royal College of Nursing and Unite, however, have voted against the pay deal. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers, and he urged the remaining unions to accept the offer.
It's a good day for NHS staff, but it's also a good day for patients. It will allow us to move forward. Now the NHS Staff Council has ratified this deal. It's been accepted by the majority of the NHS Staff Council, and we can now move forward, focus together on the patients, and also ensure that staff get their pay rise much sooner than would have been the case under the pay review body process.
Meanwhile, a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others has appeared on the witness stand for the first time today. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court for the offences alleged to have taken place in 2015 and 2016. When asked by her defence lawyer if she had intentionally done anything to hurt or kill the babies at the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital, she denied it. Former US President Donald Trump is in Turnberry in Scotland at one of his golf resorts. Yesterday, he opened a new course named after his late mother near Aberdeen. His trip coincides with a visit to the UK last week by one of his likely rivals for the Republican nomination for 2024, the Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis. And tomorrow night, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage interviews Donald Trump from his golf estate in Scotland. Watch on GB News at 7 o'clock. Now, the King and Queen Consort have met with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. A reception was held at the Palace of Westminster ahead of the coronation on Saturday. Along with the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, the monarch also met with other members of Parliament. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
So, a quick snapshot then of today's markets. The pound buying you $1.2458 and €1.1361 euros. The price of gold, if you fancy an ounce, is £1,600 and 90 pence. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,827 points.
Yes, OK. Well, hello, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here at Buckingham Palace, and we will be here throughout the course of the day and indeed all the way through until the coronation. Now, I believe I'm going to play you some pictures very shortly of the King in action a little bit earlier on, and he was with Rishi Sunak at Westminster Palace, and he was meeting some other dignitaries. That is Lindsay Hoyle, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer all there, and there is King Charles shaking hands, pressing the flesh, meeting people ahead of his big day on Saturday, and him there meeting Rishi Sunak, you can see, and flanked by Lindsay Hoyle. So there we go. He's doing the rounds as well. That was just a little bit earlier on at Westminster Palace as he led in a procession there. So that's some latest clips for you from the King. Now, OK, moving on from all of that, the Sun newspaper has conducted a poll of 3,000 Brits, and I thought this was absolutely fascinating, so I wanted to bring this to you. So it's about what they think about the state of British politics. One aspect of the poll has caught my eye. Well, in fact, a few did, but we're just going to talk about one of them now. When asked about Britain's history, just 18% said that we should be ashamed of our past, compared to the 45% who want to cheer for it. Let's get David Starkey's view on all of this right now, shall we? So, David, look, I mean, our past, I suppose you could say, well, we shouldn't really be proud of all of it, should we?
No, of course we shouldn't. What we should be proud of is that we have a past which has steadily improved. Well, I think the important thing is, and it's fundamental for democracy, that you believe that you live in a society which has fundamental morality and fundamental value. If you don't, your actions are worthless. And what's remarkable is that we as a people, very early on, there's, you said David Starkey, historian, in the 16th century, the age of Shakespeare, they had exactly this debate. is human society, not the church, but is the Kingdom of England, does it have moral value? Saints said it didn't. Sir Thomas More said it doesn't, only the church does. The great bulk of people in England said, yes, it does have value. In other words, there's something worth defending, and there's something much more important, worth improving.
Yes.
Unless you believe there's a fundamental value, why try to improve
well,
it?
This is it. And I was chatting to a lady earlier on. Hopefully we're going to be able to get some of these clips out a little bit later on in the show. But what she said to me, I thought was interesting. She said that we've got an empire, a commonwealth, and we're an international country now. And we are currently sitting in, well, probably the most international spot in the country, actually. I mean, the amount of tourism that you get here, and it's in a big multicultural city. What she said to me was her view was that with the amount of diversity that Britain has now and the amount of mass immigration that Britain has now, part and parcel of that is that you will inevitably get people who do not share the same level of patriotic national pride about our history, and therefore maybe that is why we're seeing these figures diluted. What do you think?
No. I think on the contrary, many immigrants, and I know, and I'm now not just speaking as a guess, truthfully, are the ones who most passionately identify with Britain. Look at somebody like Suella Braverman. Look at the Prime Minister. These are the children of immigrants, and yet they wholly and absolutely identify with Britain. Eastern European immigrants passionately identify with Britain because they've experienced what the little fashionable isn't communism lovely. They know that it's not. They know that communism is vile and dangerous and that socialism kills. And they're passionate about British values. I think what's happened is a lot of this is youthful disenchantment, because what's been going on is a deliberate campaign to not simply devalue our history, but to delegitimate our history. The whole of Black Lives Matter and whatever is an attempt at saying British history is fundamentally as wicked as German history. The Germans carried out the Holocaust, we carried out slavery and the empire. In my view, it's a completely false equivalence, but that, in other words, it's a genuine attempt to destroy people's faith in their own country.
You know what was fascinating? What was fascinating was when I was talking to people, I deliberately went up to people who I knew weren't English, right? And I said to them, where are you from? And I spoke to people from Canada, from America, from India, one individual from the Caribbean, one chap from France as well. And I asked them all pretty straightforwardly. I said, if you were British, would you be proud of it? And they all said yes.
Yeah.
They all said yes. And with the exception of Waterloo, but that chap was French, which I think we'll let them off that particular one, won't we? But I thought that was really interesting. That I wonder whether or not sometimes it's the Brits themselves who feel the need to be more self-deprecating than other countries even like us to be.
I think there's a strong element of that, but I think we mustn't forget there's been a deliberate attempt at the devaluing and the what's technically called delegitimation of British history, and it's in our schools and it's in our universities, which is why there's an enormous gap between older and younger people on these kind of issues. I didn't see the Sun poll, but did it look at it divided into age group?
No, not on that particular question.
But you see, this is something fundamental. The signs of disenchantment are very much amongst the young.
They are.
And
that's my concern. That's my concern.
And it is my concern too. And it is precisely, as you said, because history isn't simply taught badly. History is actually taught as the opposite of what happened. The whole of the attack on Britain over slavery is wholly misconceived. Because, as I said before, no country thought it was wrong. There is no belief in it's wrong. Slavery is a universal phenomenon. The only thing that's peculiar is that in Britain, somewhere about 1760, people start to decide that it's wrong. And they don't do so because of Christianity. They do so because Britain was a country that believed in freedom. Why is that? Right, we're all going to sing various silly patriotic songs. Why do we sing Britons never, never shall be slaves in Rule Britannia? It's not because they were thinking of black slavery. It's because we call the French, I'm afraid this is going back to Waterloo, we call the French slaves because they were subject to an absolute monarchy, which is why they had a revolution and why we didn't. So ours is a history that, apart from the horror of our own civil war in the 17th century, it's one where we haven't had revolutions, we've had improvement. We've had a fundamental structure of government that is responsible, that is legally based and can get better. And we've all got this is so important, everybody, we've all got to get back to that common understanding, that agreement that we have. It's not perfect. No human society is perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect society, but we're one that has always been able to improve. I mean, look at the whole business of the campaign by women for the vote, or by my ancestors and your ancestors, the working class for the vote. They didn't say, let's tear Parliament down. They said, we want the vote for Parliament. And it's that sense of the ability to improve, be responsive that matters.
Exactly. And that was one aspect of this poll. I am going to be raising some of the others that really caught my eye, and I'll be fascinated to know your views on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It showed when people were asked that they do think that Rishi Sunak can win the election. Different question as to whether or not they think that he will. But what was fascinating for me was on some of the core issues that this poll asked people on, which was about women's rights and about trans issues being taught in schools and how they're taught in schools. People will say that the vast majority of us have, quotes unquote, conservative values when it comes to that side of things, and they don't want things to go too far. So that's fascinating for Rishi Sunak to think about as well. Another interesting one was whether or not they thought the government was handling the small boats crisis well. 70-odd% thought that they weren't, but a majority are in favour of the Rwanda plan, which implies to me that the majority of the British public don't think the government is going far enough. So when the government is maybe stepping back and going, oh, I don't want to offend people by being a bit too strong about what's going on in the Channel, the implication that I've read there, and I'm going to be discussing this later on, is that maybe people do want them to get their backsides in gear and do a bit more about it. But quite literally closer to home now, ladies and gentlemen, energy bills. How are your energy bills? I hope that obviously as the summer months loom, then they are going to go down massively. BP has just produced massive profits. They made £4 billion in the first 3 months of this year. Now, I used to be dead against windfall taxes, but I'm starting to shift on this because I think it's becoming undeniable now, undeniable in just my personal view, that people are at it. Big companies are at it. And I don't want people profiting off our misery. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
News channel.
Welcome back to Buckingham Palace, ladies and gentlemen. With me, Patrick Christys. I will be here all the way through until 6 p.m. as we build up to the coronation. I've got loads ahead between now and 4 o'clock, including an interview as well with a prominent member of the royal family. But now, let's get news a little bit away from the palace. There is some other news in town, isn't there? And the calls now for a windfall tax on energy giants are growing after BP reported yet more bumper profits. While we all face ever-increasing energy bills, BP made £4 billion in the first 3 months of this year. Shadow Energy Secretary Ed Miliband described the startling figure as unearned, unexpected windfall of war. Now, look, initially, I think along with quite a few other people, was against the windfall tax. It did seem like a bit of a draconian measure that might turn companies off, and these companies maybe do quite a lot. And actually, we're dealing in large figures here, aren't we? So maybe they do generate rather a lot of money for us, and we wouldn't want to turn that away, would we? However, is this now a little bit too much? Has the Rubicon been crossed? Is it becoming indefensible that these companies, who are absolutely massively profiting now, do need to pay us a little bit more? Robert Palmer joins me, who's the Executive Director of Tax Justice UK. Look, Robert, where are you on this? Do you think that they should be paying a bit more tax? I can imagine your answer, but say it anyway.
Well, companies like BP are absolutely printing cash at the moment, and this isn't due to any particular skill of theirs, it's because of the war in Ukraine. At the same time, as you said, we've got businesses, companies, households, people around the country who are really struggling to pay their fuel bills and their energy bills. So I think beefing up our existing windfall tax makes economic sense and political sense. And what is BP doing with all these profits? It's handing it back to its shareholders, who are mostly overseas investors.
Yeah, and I just wonder, what would you make to the argument then that these companies actually do a huge amount in terms of what they already pay? They employ a lot of people. There'll be taxes involved with all of that. And, you know, it's just business, isn't it, at the end of the day? If events in the world kick off and it means that they happen to be earning more money because their profit margins are down potentially, or they're not in this case, clearly, then that's just so be it.
I mean, this country has got a long history of imposing windfall taxes, particularly around times of war or kind of like really, really big, unusual profits. So Margaret Thatcher's government brought in windfall taxes. We had windfall taxes after both the First and the Second World War. I think politically and economically, companies, businesses, individuals, households are crying out for support, and BP is absolutely raking it in. And as I said, that money is being funneled into shareholders and shareholder profits, and it's not really being put into more investment. So I think there's a pretty clear case that the government should be tightening up and closing the loopholes in the existing windfall tax, asking BP and other big oil companies to pay more money and funneling that into public services and supporting people and businesses around the country.
Yeah, I just wonder whether or not they've had their fun now, and I think this is kind of where I'm at, which is certainly not the most scientific argument that you could possibly come up with, but I got that maybe in the early days of the Ukraine war and a variety of other issues that were plaguing us, maybe you could say, OK, all right, well, this is just the way of the world and they need to make their money. But actually now, we are so far along from this, there's no sign of this coming down whatsoever. The shareholders are seeing, their profits increase exponentially, and ordinary people now, have been suffering for far too long. I mean, is there a sense that, look, this has just gone on long enough?
I mean, I totally agree. And other countries that have oil industries ask their oil and gas companies to contribute more money in tax. Ultimately, BP is pumping oil and gas that's British oil and gas. To some extent, this is stuff that belongs to all of us, and we should be making sure that we're getting a share of these profits. rather than the money ending up in shareholders' pockets and not being invested in sort of, extra support that we can have around
It's all very
the
well
country.
and good. I mean, look, it's all very well and good saying, just lobbing phrases out there like windfall tax, okay? It's all very well and good just saying, well, these people need to pay more. Do you actually have any idea what kind of level the windfall tax would be, what kind of money it would generate, and what that can pay for?
Yeah, so at the moment, there's this 11 billion loophole in the current windfall tax, which means that companies like BP pay almost no windfall tax if they're investing in more oil and gas. So, there are these big loopholes in the existing windfall tax. And countries like Norway have a higher windfall tax. And over the decades, Norway has built up a huge pot of money that it's got to pay out to pensioners in their old age. We in the UK didn't take that approach. And we're in a different situation. So I think there's lots of different options the government could do. I think there's going to be increasing political pressure for the government to ask companies like BP, which are printing cash at the moment, to stump up some more money.
Okay, look, all right, thank you very, very much. It's been fantastic to have you on the show, and hopefully we'll chat to you again very, very soon. That's Robert Palmer, there, Executive Director of Tax Justice UK. Now, there are just 4 days to go until the coronation of King Charles, and GB News is, of course, the place for the best coverage of this historic occasion. We will be camped up here outside Buckingham Palace for the remainder of the run-up and indeed, of course, crucially, on the day itself. And I've got a lot coming your way, OK? I have got a huge amount coming your way today, OK? So we're going to be talking about whether or not the royal family and the monarchy should be slimmed down, whether or not it is right that Kate is going to be apparently wearing some kind of floral headdress and not indeed a proper tiara, as it were. Why indeed is that? I'm also going to be talking about national pride, because a new poll has said that, in my view anyway, not enough of us are actually proud of our national history. But there are some other big talking points in town for us today as well. We're going to be discussing whether or not actually voters' ID, believe it or not, is indeed racist. I'm going to be also discussing loads of stuff about now parents are going to be able to regain control of what is being taught in their schools. For too long, parents have been a second thought and have just been told that maybe they're bigoted if they don't want their children to be taught a load of woke tosh. It's Patrick Christys right here on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. It's 4 o'clock and I am Patrick Christys, and as you can see, I am live outside Buckingham Palace with the wonderful Michael Cole. You got a sneak peek of that. GB News is Britain's news channel, so what better place to get the lowdown on Saturday's coronation? Now, I've got it all coming today because King Charles has been out and about today. He's met the Prime Minister as the countdown continues to Saturday. He's also met Keir Starmer, and the crowds are building on the Mall. I've been speaking to some of the people who just absolutely love the royal family so much. They've been camping out, and it's still 4 days to go before the coronation. I'll be speaking to other people as well. I've got all of this coming your way and much, much more with today's top royal topics. Yes, indeed. So Princess Anne has absolutely slapped down calls for a streamlined monarchy. I will tell you why, and I think it goes a long way to demonstrating why she's always one of the most popular royals. What on earth is going on with Kate not wearing a proper tiara but wearing the floral headdress? I want to sort that issue out. Do you have national pride? Not enough people in this country, according to a new poll, appear to have that. Why is that? Why are we not as proud of our national history as, in my view, we should be? But it isn't just royal stuff today, ladies and gentlemen, OK? We're going to be talking about the Lucy Letby trial. She's pleaded not guilty, of course, after a series of baby deaths at Chester Hospital. She's taken the stand today, so it's going to be interesting to hear from that. We're also expecting a big breakthrough and a breaking line out of the Keir Starmer, Sue Gray shenanigans, if indeed there were any. We're going to be taking that to you. That might cast a long shadow over Keir Starmer and his chances at the next general election, and revive issues and concerns about Partygate and Boris Johnson as well. I'm also going to be talking about parents now being able to wrestle back some control of their children's education from schools that many people believe have been infected and indoctrinated with woke ideology. So I've got a huge mix of stuff coming your way here, all the way through until 6 p.m. with me, Patrick Christys. But now it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Let's bring you up to date with the latest news this hour. And more than 1 million NHS staff in England will receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be implemented. Members of the NHS Staff Council said the unions had agreed to the deal for staff. It includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. But the Royal College of Nursing and Unite have voted against the pay deal. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers and urges the remaining unions to accept the offer.
It's a good day for NHS staff, but it's also a good day for patients. It will allow us to move forward. Now the NHS Staff Council has ratified this deal. It's been accepted by the majority of the NHS Staff Council, and we can now move forward, focus together on the patients, and also ensure that staff get the pay rise much sooner than would have been the case under the pay review body process.
Meanwhile, a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others gave testimony during her first time in the witness stand today. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court for the offences alleged to have taken place between June 2015 and June 2016. Our North West reporter Sophie Reaper has been in court.
Today, former nurse Lucy Letby has given evidence for the very first time in this trial. A jury here at Manchester Crown Court heard the former nurse questioned about her life leading up to becoming a nurse and then the accusations that came in September of 2016. She told the court that her job was her life and that she'd always wanted to work with children. She said, "I'm there to help and to care, not to harm."
Former US President Donald Trump is in Turnberry in Scotland visiting one of his golf resorts. Yesterday, he opened a new course named after his late mother at Meany Estate near Aberdeen. His trip coincides with the visit to the UK last week by one of his likely rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, Ron DeSantis. And tomorrow night, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage interviews Donald Trump from his golf estate in Scotland. Watch that on GB News at 7 p.m. Now, teachers across England are striking today in an ongoing pay dispute, with hundreds marching outside the Department of Education. In April, members of the National Education Union overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer. The NEU, along with 3 other teaching unions, rejected an offer which included a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.3% pay rise for most staff in September. Today's walkout is the 5th undertaken by educators this year, causing major disruptions. Labour MP for Leeds East, Richard Bergen, says striking is a last resort.
We're seeing is people fighting back because they've got no choice. And there are ways to fund this. For example, just equalising capital gains tax with income tax, which used to be the case even for a period under Thatcher's government in the 80s, would raise more than enough money to give every single public sector worker in this country an inflation-matching pay rise. So the money is there. The government doesn't seem to have the right priorities because the government should be putting our public services and working people across this country first, and I'm afraid they're not.
Business News and the oil giant BP is reporting stronger than expected profits in the first 3 months of 2023, reaching close to £4 billion. The result was a reduction from the £4.96 billion that BP made in the same quarter last year, but well ahead of the £3.44 billion analysts had expected it to make. Now, as you've been hearing today on GB News, Princess Anne says she believes King Charles will not be changed by his new role as monarch. Talking with the Canadian broadcaster CBC ahead of the coronation, Princess Anne said the King, like the rest of the family, is committed to public service. But, the Princess Royal argued, slimming down the royal family didn't sound like a great idea to her. In response to reports, the King may reduce the number of working royals.
Well, you know what you're getting because he's been practising for a bit. And I don't think he'll change. You know, he is committed of his own level of service, and that will remain true.
Princess Anne. Now, King Charles' coronation is expected to provide a £120 million boost to pubs across the UK. The British Beer and Pub Association says local pubs and breweries are planning to pour 62 million pints over the bank holiday weekend. Pubs will be allowed to stay open as well until 1 o'clock in the morning. And today, the King and Queen Consort have been meeting with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, a reception being held at the Palace of Westminster ahead of His Majesty's coronation. Along with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, the monarch also met with other members of Parliament. This is GB News, more news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys back here at Buckingham Palace, yes, and we really are your home of coronation coverage as GB News gears you up nicely for what we're expecting all the way through this week and into the big day itself on Saturday. But I want to start with a fantastic interview from many people's favourite royal, whisper it quietly, of course, because we are here for the King's coronation, but many people's favourite royal is his sister, Princess Anne. And she'd said the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy is not a good one. Now, she was reacting to reports that King Charles III could reduce the number of working royals, and there's a lot that she said in this interview, OK, and actually I think it went a long way to the idea that she is a pretty sound individual. She went on to talk about, you know, reparations and the old slave trade stuff and whether or not the royal family actually has anything to apologise for. And she spoke a lot about activism. But here is what she had to say about a trimmed-down monarchy.
Oh, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
I'm sure it does
I'm not
not.
quite sure what else, we can do.
Well, we've done a quick swap, ladies and gentlemen. So David Starkey, the royal historian extraordinaire, has been replaced by a very different animal. It's royal correspondent Michael Cole. Michael, Princess Anne has, in my view, absolutely got her head screwed on. And frankly, the country would be in safe hands if she ever did have to take over.
Princess Anne, the Princess Royal. I have interviewed her myself, I remember, on the high plains of Burma by the Irrawaddy. A well-known phrase which involves blood and a stone comes to mind talking to her, but this is a very interesting interview. And what she's saying is that her brother hasn't got the right idea about slimming down. Now, essentially, what he's saying is he wants the direct line of succession to be the focus. That's Prince William, the Prince of Wales, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis. That's it. What I think he's doing, and I'd be interested to know her view on this, I think he's channeling their grandfather. King George VI, he said the royal family was at its best when it was just us four, meaning himself, Queen Elizabeth, who became the Queen Mother, and the two princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret. And I think he's right. Members of the royal family are getting older, they're not capable of doing so much, but is that necessarily a bad thing? Less can be more. There are so many royal events, they don't get covered. Now, when I wrote my first royal story, which was as long ago as 1962, 61 years ago, every royal event got maximum coverage. Now, these days, these people in Buckingham Palace despair because the press is not interested. Now, less can be more, and then they will become more of a special event.
But one of the key reasons why a lot of people, ordinary members of the public, say that we need a streamlined, slimmed-down monarchy is because they think it's costing the British taxpayer too much. But that actually, if you break down the cost of it all, isn't really true, because we do turn a profit, don't we?
Of course, and the sovereign grant, which comes from a percentage from the income of the Duchy of Lancaster, when the monarch ceded the Duchy of Lancaster to the government, gave away its own property in response to getting a percentage back. It used to be about 12.5%. Because they're renovating this place behind, it's gone up to 25%. Because of that, nearly all of that money doesn't go into Prince Charles's, now King Charles's, back pocket. It goes to pay the salaries of the people who run the thing. And if you compare the cost of this monarchy to, for instance, the cost of the American presidency, I mean, it's minuscule in comparison, and it's good value for money.
It is indeed. Now, I was out and about a little bit earlier on. There is a fantastic atmosphere building here all around us, actually. And if you are in London and you fancy coming down, then do, because we're mingling around. It'd be lovely to see you all, wonderful GB News viewers. I've been talking to a lot of you. Colourful bunch, it must be said, but you'll love to see it. But here's what some of them said to me earlier on about whether or not we should have a streamlined, slimmed-down monarchy. Take it away.
The way things are going on in this country at the moment, with money and people losing their jobs and their homes of no fault of their own. And then they see all this, it's like they're going to find a little bit bitter, aren't they?
Great.
It depends what you mean by slimming down. I mean, haven't they slimmed down already a bit? I'm really not. I don't live here. I'm from New Zealand.
Yes.
So
well, welcome.
Thank
So
you,
what
but
Princess Anne says is that we've already slimmed it down enough. There are fewer hangers-on, and she doesn't really see that we could be doing any more than we are.
Well, if there are a few hangers-on, and I don't know who they are, but yeah, trim them.
Do you think it would maybe make the royal family more relatable in the modern world, and if they cost us less money?
Yes. Yes. But I do believe, hasn't he sort of trimmed back the coronation to cost less?
Yeah.
So making an effort, but I mean they exist, so it's going to cost a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to cost a certain amount.
So what would you say to people who think that we should be cutting the cost of the royal family? The taxpayer shouldn't be paying for them at all.
No, I think that what they do for our country, which is huge ambassadors worldwide, more than pays its own way for our country. And I think I'm a taxpayer, and I'm very happy for our taxes to be going for the royal family.
Would you pay even more?
No. I pay quite enough, thank you very much.
Okay, so those are the views of some wonderful GB News viewers there, which is lovely, great to see. So that's the kind of general atmosphere when it comes to the mood music on slimming down the monarchy, and largely speaking, I think many people agree with Princess Anne that it shouldn't be. And the idea for a lot of people that it's about cutting costs to the taxpayer is a bit flawed, really. It's not really quite true. And there is concerns as well that, well, if we just abolished the monarchy or did away with it, then they might keep all of the money that they make from their various different lands, etc. So we would all actually be poorer as a result. So economically and financially, actually, believe it or not, doesn't make too much sense to streamline the monarchy even more. Perhaps it is just as Michael Cole was alluding to earlier, maybe just a part of a succession thing that King Charles himself might want to do, just for a focus in terms of his own personal streamlining of it from the public, not out of the public purse. But let's turn now to another one of the major talking points, believe it or not, ahead of Saturday's coronation. And that is some of the items of, what would you say, clothing, jewellery or non-jewellery, plantation that is supposedly going to be worn on Saturday. And there are strong rumours that the fantastic regal jewel-encrusted tiara that we're all expecting a lot of the ladies present to be wearing might not be worn, and indeed Kate might be wearing some kind of floral headdress. And I want to know whether or not people think that's a good idea. I'll play you some clips of what the great British public said. But on the left there, if you're watching us on the telly, that's a tiara. In case I can't believe I have to talk you through this, by the way. But on the left there, that's a tiara, and on the right there, that's some flowers. Right, okay, great stuff. I'm going to bring in Michael Cole now, royal commentator. Michael, could you tell there which one was which?
Yes, I could tell the difference, and that's interesting. Now, of course, we don't know whether it's true. I'm slightly sceptical about it, but wouldn't that go completely with the invitation to the coronation, which featured the Green Man? Yeah. Echoes of the rural past of this country. And don't forget that when Kate Middleton, as she then was in the last minutes when she got married at Westminster Abbey 12 years ago, there was a whole forest of trees down the nave as she went to get married at the high altar with Prince William. So it may come through, and maybe that will please the eco mob. Who can say? The vegan people,
nothing will
the
please
people
them,
in the
Michael.
sun.
Nothing will please them. You can try and appease them, but you will never please them. I'm telling you that right now. Nothing will be good enough. But the fact is that when it comes to the jewels, the royal family already own them.
Yeah,
So
well, the properties, the king only owns two properties outright. He owns Balmoral Castle in Scotland, and he owns Sandringham Estate in Norfolk. Those are the only...
But the jewellery, I mean, as in the stones,
well,
the diamonds, and all of this stuff.
They are property of the state.
Right.
They are not personally owned by the monarch,
Fine.
no.
So the point is that they exist. They're already
Yes,
here. And so the only chance that the British public would ever get to see them is on events like this. So why not wear them?
Yeah, exactly. Or go to the Jewel Tower at the Tower of London, where you can queue up. And of course, famously, anybody who lives and was born in London never goes to the Tower of London because it's always there. But when you do go, there are thousands of people, and they absolutely love it. The bling is knockout. I mean, we were collecting these things at the time when they were available.
Yes.
And there's no greater hoard on earth.
No.
I mean, it is utterly spectacular, and most of it will be on display. Nearly everything was created, since the reign of Charles II, because Cromwell broke up and destroyed all of the royal jewels, and the orb itself has got a bit of a bent cross. Why? Because Captain Blood broke in to the Tower of London and tried to steal them, and one of his merry men dropped it, and it's still got a bit of a wonk on it.
Oh my gosh! I tell you what, it's a good job you're here for all of these wonderful little insights. But, so I was out and about a bit earlier on, and as I like to do, get myself some company, keep myself busy, and I was chatting to a few people. I believe we're going to have a clip of one of them now, who I think some people might remember from yesterday. There's a chap called Patrick, so shares the same name. Yes, indeed we do. This is great. OK, so royal superfan called Patrick. He's been camping out and is still doing it. I saw him earlier today, actually. He's in good form. And I was talking to him a little bit about the tiara. Now, Patrick is absolutely adamant, and as you're about to see, absolutely adamant that Catherine should be wearing it. And indeed, he was shocked to learn that Catherine might wear a flower crown and not a tiara. I've got a feeling that the clip I'm about to play you now might go viral.
A wee bit upset that some of the royal family, I don't think are going to be wearing tiaras and coronets.
I was going to ask you about this. I was reading on the way in, so apparently Catherine's going to be wearing some kind of floral headdress, and you look gutted about that.
I am. I was actually really hoping that Catherine was going to be the exception. I was like, there's no way they're going to get Princess Anne coming up rocking her tiara and her coronet, and then she's going to get changed in Westminster Abbey and come down the horse. So I said, and I can't see Sophie, Anne sitting there with no tiara on, and Sophie and Princess Alexandra and all, and Beatrice and all with their tiaras on. So it says, it must be just Queen Camilla and Catherine, Princess of Wales, wearing Catherine with a coronet. But I'm even more shocked now that Catherine isn't wearing it. Tell her to get her tiara on.
I'm
here for the tiaras.
Oh, bless him, there he is. He's absolutely devastated. He said he wants to see the bling, Michael.
It's absolutely wonderful. I wonder if you realise that because of this coronation, a new continental drift is happening and all the nuts are rolling towards Buckingham Palace.
I tell you what, I'm just
yes,
break
there
now
we are.
We've got some action behind us.
Definitely, I think that's the King. I'm pretty sure it's the King.
Well, you heard it
going
here
back to Clarence House, just up the road here. It's a quick left, and he's home. I think they probably have been doing the last minute, or perhaps not even the last minute, rehearsals and preparations in there today in the big ballroom, which is the big enough space to replicate the Abbey spaces. So that's what we just saw.
Fantastic. Well, look, this is absolutely wonderful stuff to be here at Buckingham Palace. It does. I know this is Michael Cole's natural habitat. Okay, so they all know him around these parts. All right, he can't move for people asking for pictures and autographs.
Not true.
The things I've seen him sign. By the way. Anyway, there we go.
No.
But this is part and parcel of it all, okay? As we bring you the big build-up to the coronation, because it's for little events like that when you see the people going past and whizzing past and getting out and about and talking to royal super fans and wonderful people who watch GB News, who have been hanging around here a little bit as well. So get yourselves down if you're in the area. Come and say hello. It would be lovely to hear from you. We are here quite literally all week. We'll have loads more from Buckingham Palace shortly, though. But I will have, of course, the rest of the day's news too. And there is rather a lot out there. This one's fascinating. Did Partygate investigator Sue Gray break the rules when she spoke to Sir Keir Starmer about becoming his chief of staff? There were big suspicions about that at the time, and bear in mind that Keir Starmer's supposed to be the rules man, isn't he? Well, maybe he isn't. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to this wonderful setting of Buckingham Palace with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, your home of the Coronation. The crowds are continuing to build here as if the sense of excitement ahead of Saturday's coronation wasn't building enough already. But there are some other big stories in town. Non-royal, we're firmly back into the world of the political now, and Sue Gray, the former civil servant, controversial civil servant, it must be said, whose reporting to Partygate contributed to the downfall of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. Well, she is now set to become Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. But there are allegations that she advised the parliamentary investigation into lockdown breaches at Downing Street whilst she was holding talks with the Labour leader. Now, if that's true, then she would have broken the parliamentary rules. So, Mr. Rules himself, Sir Keir Starmer, he'd be in a bit of hot water, but also the lady in charge of enforcing the rules. Well, hang on a minute. Have you actually been sticking to them? Tom Harwood joins me now, our Deputy Political Editor. Tom, what's the latest?
Yes, we're still waiting for this written ministerial statement, but we do know it is coming today. On the order paper of the House of Commons, the document produced each morning to show what exactly is going on, there's a slightly cryptic clue. This clue reads, Minister for the Cabinet Office will be releasing a statement saying, updated to the circumstances leading to the resignation of a senior civil servant. Well, who on earth might that be? Government has behind the scenes confirmed that this is a statement into Sue Gray, which we are expecting today. No word yet on the precise timing, but we do have some indications into what this statement is about, in terms of what this statement is looking into. And this is whether or not rules were broken, whether or not the Civil Service Code of Conduct was broken. When were these discussions had with the Labour Party? And has this affected the impartiality of the civil service? Sue Gray, of course, conducted that investigation into parties across Whitehall, across Downing Street, and particularly into the conduct of Boris Johnson. She then advised the parliamentary inquiry into whether or not Boris Johnson misled the House of Commons. And the allegation is that during that time, she was speaking secretly to the Labour Party. She was liaising with the office of Sir Keir Starmer. Now, we may well find out whether or not that is true this afternoon. And if it is true, if she had been having those meetings without declaring them, as the Civil Service Code of Conduct says senior civil servants must do, declaring them to their ministers, if those declarations were not made, then there is some hot water and potentially a big cooling-off period that will be delivered for Sue Gray. She won't be allowed to join the office of Sir Keir Starmer for potentially a year and a half, depending on how harshly the civil servants in charge take this potential breach. However, it must be said, in the past, different parties have hired former civil servants. In fact, that's something that the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has been saying in defending this appointment today.
I'm confident that Sue Gray hasn't broken any rules, but Labour have always understood that an ACOBA process must be gone through. But if we look at the past appointments of chiefs of staff to leader of the opposition, both David Cameron and Tony Blair appointed a civil servant, a former civil servant, to those roles because it is important from opposition we get the very best support in preparing for government. We wanted the best person for the job. That is Sue Gray, and we hope that she can join the team very soon.
So the Labour Party sticking by their appointee, but as I say, it won't be long before we have to see what the Cabinet Office Minister has to say with regard to the update of this investigation.
Tom Harwood, thank you very, very much. Our Deputy Political Editor there, Tom Harwood. Now, look, keep your eyes and ears peeled on this very show, ladies and gents, because we are expecting, in fact, I'd go as far as to say it's relatively likely, that we are going to get a big announcement on that Sue Gray, Keir Starmer stuff live here in the next hour and a half, which is, of course, when I'm on air. So we will bring that to you, and that, I think, could be absolutely massive. It will be massive for Keir Starmer's reputation. It will be massive for Sue Gray's reputation as well, whether or not it was Sue Red instead of Sue Gray. And also, it'll be big for Boris Johnson fans who do feel as though he was actually ousted and he was unfairly dispatched, having been the most democratically elected Prime Minister pretty much that we've ever had, and whether or not that is now going to be called into question. I know a lot of you will have moved on from Partygate, but hey, it's reared its head again. Either way, we'll bring you the very latest. But continue to revel around with me, please, in the political gutter, if you don't mind, because a new poll that's been conducted by the Sun newspaper, which we discussed a little earlier, it's got a lot of startling revelations into it. Now, 3,000 Brits were asked about their thoughts on British politics and a variety of different issues. So what will worry the Labour Party now is that the majority of those asked said that Rishi Sunak was a better leader than Sir Keir Starmer. We went out and about earlier on to get some reaction to that poll and see whether or not it is true that more people think that Rishi Sunak is a better leader than Sir Keir Starmer.
Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer? Which one of those, if any, and why?
Well, as my husband said, if that's the only choices, I'm not really keen on either of them, to be honest, but I would think Sunak rather than Starmer, because I don't like Starmer.
Why don't you like him? What about him?
I don't think he cares about the country. I think he just cares about himself.
I wouldn't want to choose between either of them, actually.
Why is that?
I don't agree with Labour policies throughout my lifetime. As far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, I think he's the complete opposite, and I don't think he's capable of thinking about the wider public.
Rishi Sunak. I think he's done a good job since he came in under difficult circumstances. He's sticking to what he says, and Starmer, I just don't trust Starmer. He flips and flops over things, especially with the gender issues, and I just don't trust him what he's saying.
And there's a new poll out today that Rishi Sunak is more popular than Keir Starmer for one of the first times. Which of the two do you prefer and
Neither.
why?
Neither.
Why?
They're all liars. I don't trust any politician at all. No, don't like either. I don't agree with any. They just argue over anything. They'll never agree on anything. They just argue for argument's sake, like a bunch of children.
Oh, I'm really, that's not my bag really, but I don't know, probably, yeah, Rishi probably, I would imagine. Yeah, not really a big fan of Keir Starmer, but yeah, not really a big fan of either in all honesty, but yeah, probably Rishi, yeah, just edges it for me.
OK, well, there we go. Apparently that Vox Pop was brought to us from Welshpool, so fascinating to get to the views of the people there. But there was a lot of other revelations that came out of this poll. So, yes, that people thought that Rishi Sunak would make a better leader than Keir Starmer. People did think that the Conservatives could, and the clue is in the word there, could win the next general election. The answer was very different whether people thought that they will. But there were other things, core political questions about individuals' belief systems, voters' belief systems that were asked during this poll. Like, where do you stand when it comes to the education of children about various different sexual issues? So transgenderism, for example. Where should that stop in schools? And people said they wanted them to be taught about gender issues, but they basically wanted it to stop there. Well, that does tie in with the Conservative Party's ideology, more so than it does for the Labour Party. When it came to the small boats crisis, 77% of people said they didn't think the government was doing well. That, let's be honest, is because we haven't stopped the small boats, didn't it? But more people than not backed the Rwanda programme, and the implication there, for me anyway, is that people presumably wanted the government to actually be stronger than they are being, which again, they're not going to get from the Labour Party, are they? A majority of people wanted us to stay in the ECHR, though, so again, maybe the public is a bit confused here, because the jury's out, frankly, isn't it, as to how we could be stronger while staying in the ECHR. There's quite a lot going on there, but I just think we need to watch this space when it comes to polls like this, because it wasn't so long ago we were talking about absolute disaster for the Conservative Party, and that is not the case. And as I'm going to bring you more detail on that latest polling throughout the course of this show, my big takeaway from it is if the Conservative Party actually start to behave like the Conservative Party, then frankly the public might actually get on their side, because their values appear to be more aligned with that of the public than the Labour Party. But there is, of course, something that we can't just get around, that potentially after this length of time in office, people are just sick of the Tories. GB Views at GBNews.uk. I'll have loads more from Buckingham Palace very, very shortly. Lots of royal news in town as well. But let's return now to our newsroom and get the very latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. The headlines this hour. More than 1 million NHS staff in England are going to receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be accepted. Members of the NHS Staff Council said that the unions agreed for the deal for staff, which includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. However, the Royal College of Nursing and Unite voted against the pay deal. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers and is urging the remaining unions to accept it. A nurse has been accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others and has been appearing in court, standing in the witness stand for the first time. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court today for the offences alleged to have taken place between 2015 and 2016. When asked by her defence lawyer if she'd intentionally done anything to hurt or kill babies at the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital, she denied it. The former US President Donald Trump is in Scotland at one of his golf resorts. Yesterday he opened a new course named after his late mother near Aberdeen. His trip coinciding with the visit to the UK last week of one of his likely rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Well, tomorrow night, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage will be interviewing Donald Trump from his golf estate in Turnberry in Scotland. Watch it here on GB News at 7 p.m. The King and Queen Consort have been meeting Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. A reception was held at the Palace of Westminster ahead of the coronation. Along with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, the monarch also met with other members of Parliament. You're up to date. I'm back in half an hour. See you then.
Well, very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here, as you can see, outside Buckingham Palace, as we continue to gear up for the big day, don't we, on Saturday. GB News is your home for the coronation. Now, we'll have loads of royal topics coming your way, but as you can see on your screen, I'm going to talk about some other news that's in the agenda today. And I think this is a big one because it combines a couple of issues that I know that you guys care a lot about. Law and order and sense of justice, prison sentences for people who've committed heinous crimes, women's safety, public safety, and also, crucially, our deportation system or lack of. So it's been reported that another foreign rapist who was set to be kicked out of the UK is still living it. Conrad Bryce was jailed for 10 years in 2015 for rape. He was then due to be deported to Jamaica in 2020, but he successfully challenged that deportation. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is said to be one of those who had written to the Home Office to oppose the planned deportations. Yes, there we go. Joining me now to help understand all of this is Chris Daw KC, who is a criminal barrister and an author based in London. Chris, good stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. I think a lot of people are very confused about all of this. It would imply that we're not really able to deport even some of the most heinous criminals. Is that right?
It's not, and I'll show you what I'm really confused about. I'm reading on the screen, your headline says, Daily Mail reveals Keir Starmer opposed deportation of foreign rapists. I don't know if anyone's fact-checked that story, but I've got the letter, which was written in November 2020, to the Home Office, and there are 70 signatures on it. Not one of them is Keir Starmer. He never signed the letter. He had nothing to do with it. So I don't know why it's being reported as if what the Daily Mail headline suggests is a fact, but it's not a fact. It's wrong. He didn't support the letter. It was nothing to do with him at all. So it might be wise to take Keir Starmer's name out of the headline when no one's ever checked whether he in fact was involved in the first place. But taking your point, foreign criminals are deported from this country in their thousands every single year. In this particular case, this particular person was due to be on a flight in November 2020 to Jamaica. And you may remember that was in the middle of the Windrush scandal, when many people were being sent to countries in the Commonwealth and being deported, who had every right to remain in Britain. And a large number of people wanted to make sure that those people were not entitled to be here because they weren't entitled under the Windrush period to remain in Britain. And that was why that particular flight was held up. As to why any individual may not be deported, that will depend on the time it takes for the court processes and challenges to take place. And sadly, those processes in the current climate, with all of the cuts in the legal system, take far too long. And in my view, it would be much better if rapists and serious criminals could be checked for their immigration status in a matter of minutes. And if they are convicted and sentenced, the court process should be done and dusted in a week so that they could be deported. But it does no credit to tell a false story that Keir Starmer was involved in this, because he wasn't.
No, I do want to qualify that, Chris. I do want to qualify what you said there, because the evidence is that Keir Starmer has campaigned against deportation flights. And 10 months before Bryce was due to be removed, the Labour leader signed a letter opposing all further deportation. So I absolutely take your point there that you've said about the specific letter in this case. I absolutely take your point on the specific letter in this case. The headline really should have been that he's opposed deportation such as this, and that is a point of order that is worth raising. But the general point of what we're talking about here still stands, which is that why would somebody want to oppose these flights when we are not absolutely sure who is on all of these in terms of what they've done, etc. I do find it bizarre, really, that we would not be more proactive about deporting people such as this.
We are very proactive about it, and we are proactive about it because it's almost automatic for people to be deported when they're convicted of serious crimes if they have no right to live in the United Kingdom. So foreign criminals, including now people from the EU, and indeed even before we left the EU, foreign criminals from the EU were regularly deported. They're deported every single day. The issue is not the principle, because the law says they can and should be deported, particularly rapists, murderers and other very serious criminals. The question you should be asking is, why is our legal system so deprived of resource that we can't get them through the system and out of the country in a matter of days rather than years?
But just, and this is where I want your kind of legal expertise on this, really, because my understanding was there were certain flights that were basically on the tarmac, pretty much, and that people were on those planes. I mean, I remember doing interviews about this and interviewed a chap from Amnesty International about this at length one day when one of these said flights was actually there. And then they're stopped, aren't they? Which implies to me not that the legal process and the resources aren't available to get people on the planes and get a initial decision made that they can be deported. There appears to be then more of a legal process which allows that to be relinquished. So is that quite true that there aren't enough people to deal with it, or is it just last-minute legal checks?
Yeah, it's absolutely true that there aren't enough immigration lawyers, immigration judges, or resources to deal with these cases in a sensible period of time. Anyone who has any involvement in the immigration process will tell you that that's the case. It's been the case for year after year after year. You made a very good point yourself. You said we can't be 100% sure about some of these people. Well, that's exactly why there are legal challenges, because every single time one of these flights is on the tarmac, many of the people involved haven't been through the full legal process, and that's why the judge intervenes and says you have to go through the process. You can't deport people before you've completed the legal process and the legal challenges, because deporting someone is a very serious step. If you give people access to immigration and deportation processes that can be done. My personal view as a barrister for 30 years is you could deal with every single stage of the legal challenge within 28 days in these cases, instead of 3 or 4 or 5 years. That's the tragedy. That's the travesty. And that's what's costing this country money, and it's costing this country criminals remaining in the country who should be deported.
Yeah, exactly. But it's also costing massive public support, really, because, oh, look, no one wants to be doing what I'm doing now and sitting here and reading stories about people who've committed heinous crimes that remain in a country and then, you know, God forbid, heaven forbid, but unfortunately all too often then go on to commit another very similar crime. And you think, oh, how many people have to suffer as a result of us not really being in control of our own deportation system or our own justice system? And could you just talk me through, Chris, then, if you do get someone who is from another country, so a foreign national, who commits a crime such as this, such as a rape in Britain, and then gets sentenced to prison here for a period of time, let's say 10 years, how do we deport them, and why aren't we?
Okay, so the default position is that they are automatically deported. If someone's convicted of, for example, rape, as I think is the case in this particular incident, if someone receives a 10-year sentence for rape, they are automatically deported, subject to extremely limited challenges. One of those challenges might be that they have a right to remain in Britain. For example, a British-born person can't be deported from Britain. That's, I would have thought, fairly self-evident. And likewise, someone who has a lifetime legal right to remain cannot be deported. There has to be a process to assess those claims. It should be a rapid and quick process. And in fact, it should be done before they even leave prison in an ideal world, so that they have all of their challenges while they're still in prison, and the day of their release, they get on the plane. That's what should happen. The system is such a farce, it's so broken that it doesn't happen that way. And sadly, that's why we're having this conversation.
Do you think, though, Chris, as well, just being honest about it, do you think sometimes that political ideology does maybe get in the way of strong border control? I mean, yes, I know that you can look at it two sides of the coin when it comes to, well, if we don't know necessarily everyone is on these flights, then, and they've got to go through due legal process. Yeah, fine, OK, I absolutely get that. But I can't help but wonder, Chris, having, you know, been around political journalism for quite a long period of time, whether or not some signatories to a variety of different letters or some members of certain campaign groups, they would, if I'm being honest with you, appear to have the tendency to take the side of the person who's on the plane as opposed to maybe the side of the people who don't want them to be here. And that isn't correct at all times. Do you think there is any of that, if we're being honest, Chris?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there are some people who default, in their opinion, to objections to deportations regardless. Likewise, I'm afraid, on the other side of the argument, there are those who default to say, well, deport them all, it doesn't really matter, we don't want them in this country. You can take the extreme view. As a lawyer, I say, have a well-funded, well-resourced process that can be got through in weeks or at the most a couple of months, and get rapists and murderers out of the country, because that's what's best for Britain.
OK, Chris, look, thank you very much. Chris Dorr, KC there, and I believe you've got the word allegedly on your top, and that word has got me out of trouble many, many times, so good stuff. Chris Dorr, KC, criminal barrister and author, based in... there he is, allegedly. Anyway, right, OK. Now, one of the big stories ahead of the coronation surrounds the Princess of Wales and whether or not she will wear a tiara or a flower crown, yes. And I asked some people who are already down here what they thought about this remarkably sensitive topic. Take it away.
What I want is, I don't want a cut price coronation. I don't want cut price outfits. I want to see our royal family doing their thing and be proud of them. I am already proud.
You are already very proud. So you'd like to see as many jewels as possible?
Not necessarily, no. It's worn with distinction.
You're a very classy lady, I can tell.
She's very classy.
She's very classy. Oh, what's your name?
My name's Eve, and I'm not very classy. So what I think is that she represents individuality, I think. They've come with they will be a different king and queen, and I think that's great that she's wearing flowers myself.
Oh, lovely, OK.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that's great.
We've divided the group already here, so there we go. I wonder how this one's going to go. What do you think, sir? Be very careful now. You're going to annoy one of them.
Yeah.
I'm going to annoy probably all of them. I think given that the royalty with Charles is trying to slim the thing down, given the circumstances that we're in as a nation, I think it's a great idea.
OK.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it signals to people that she is the new way. She's a new generation, and this is where the royals want to go. A more modern monarchy, if you like.
Yeah. A more sustainable, some people would say as well.
I agree with that.
Where are you on the flowery tiara?
I prefer the proper tiaras.
You prefer a proper tiara? I think she'll look more like a hippie than a future queen.
I was trying to avoid that, but
I'll drag it out of you. There you go. All right.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys here at Buckingham Palace. I will be joined by Michael Cole throughout. We're going to be returning to the royal news very, very shortly. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of this, actually. It's a worrying report that has found that nearly half of secondary schools are allowing children to self-declare their gender without their parents' consent. It comes after Rishi Sunak ordered a review into sex education. I'm joined now by Lottie Moore, who's from Policy Exchange. Lottie, thank you very, very much for joining us on this particular issue. Should parents have more of a say on what is going on in schools?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, our research that Policy Exchange conducted and is available in our report, Asleep at the Wheel, found that only 28% of secondary schools are reliably informing parents as soon as a child discloses feelings of gender distress, and that 72% of schools are teaching that people have gender identity that may be different from their biological sex. So that is really concerning, because these are beliefs that are not based in fact, but are, well, beliefs.
Yeah, no, indeed. But what can parents actually do about this? What can people do if they want to stop this?
Well, so for example, parents can go into schools and see the materials that their children are being taught. Schools have got to reveal to parents what children are being taught. Parents have an automatic right to see those materials. And the Education Secretary wrote a letter to schools reminding them of this at the end of March. The problem is that parents are busy, and taking time out of their day to go onto school premises and look at materials that their children are being taught is not always practical. So really, we need the government review into RSHE to come as soon as possible into teaching schools as to what is appropriate for schools to be teaching schools with regard to sex and gender.
And Lottie, I've got to ask the why of the whole thing now. I mean, why? You've just already said there that it doesn't appear to be based in any kind of fact, biological or scientific or anything, really. So why is it? Have the schools been infected with some kind of ideology that they seem to be pushing on the kids?
Yeah, so the roots of this really go back quite a while to when organisations such as Stonewall were kind of I suppose, under much more noble guises such as anti-bullying, equality, were basically going into schools and educating schools as to how they should kind of prevent homophobic bullying and things like that. And then about 2015, organisations such as Stonewall began to sort of become more interested in transgender activism, which is entirely different to LGB. And so really this kind of ideology was already in schools. It slipped under the radar. And at that point, Stonewall was in thousands of schools and has obviously received thousands of pounds worth of government funding as well.
No, I mean, there is probably quite a good investigation to be had there. And Lottie, when you look at these stark figures now, I just think it is pretty justified for parents to start thinking about homeschooling, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a drastic thing to do, and it's not actually it's not appropriate, and it's not a possibility for many parents. But certainly, I think there's a real kind of crunch point we've come to where some of the resources that we've seen and some of the things that are being taught in schools are absolutely entirely inappropriate in terms of what children are being exposed to, and they do have an impact, and particularly when this is going on without parental knowledge and behind parents' backs and with very little scrutiny. It's a really worrying situation.
And Lottie, I just want to ask, actually, it ties in a little bit with a poll that we've been doing a lot of talking about today that emerged about what the public think about whether or not children should be taught things like this in schools. So the majority of parents, it would seem, are perfectly comfortable for just basic gender stuff to be taught in schools. I mean, that's essentially, from as far as I understood it, just sex ed, really. But they don't really want it to go further. And in some schools, it is going further. They're even talking to them about sex positions.
Yeah, so I think that there's a really fine line to be struck here between the kind of RSHE talking about what, the kind of old-fashioned stuff like consent and the effects of drugs and alcohol and things like that, which are really, really important. I think parents are broadly supportive of that. I think it's where it's going beyond just the kind of facts and the kind of facts of life and going into contested beliefs, because gender identity beliefs, they're not based on any kind of scientific basis. And what we have is that really schools are not giving a balanced view. So gender critical belief is also protected under the Equality Act. Children need to know, by the end of secondary school, children should know how the Equality Act operates. And it seems that equality and what that means is being very much skewed in one direction. And that is really concerning, particularly for women and girls who do need to know, girls particularly, the sex-based rights accorded to them by the law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lottie, thank you very much. Lottie Moore there from Policy Exchange, just reacting to that latest study that's come out. Now, there are just 4 days to go until the coronation of King Charles III, and GB News is, of course, the place for the best coverage of this historic occasion. In the next hour, right at the top of it, I'm going to be doing a big bumper spectacular with the man himself, the big royal reporting legend Michael Cole, as we talk about all things coronation, right the way from slimming down the monarchy, whether or not as well that there should be more pomp and ceremony, and whether or not we are proud enough of our royal history. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. It's just gone 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys here, and as you can see, I am live outside Buckingham Palace from GB News' Buckingham Palace studio, and what a sight it is. GB News is Britain's news channel, so what better place to get the lowdown on Saturday's coronation. Now, a little earlier on, King Charles was out and about today. He's met with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, as well as the countdown continues to Saturday. And of course, as you can sense, the crowds are building on the Mall, and a little bit behind me here at Buckingham Palace as well. I've been speaking to some of the people who love the royal family so much that they are camping out 4 days before the coronation. I'm hoping to speak to a couple of them. Regular viewers of the show are going to see, yes, a very familiar face a little bit later on. It will be absolutely magnificent. And we're hitting all of the top topics, ladies and gentlemen. Should we slim down the monarchy? Do you think that they should have the tiaras out and not these floral tributes as well when we're actually doing the coronation on Saturday? And are you proud of Britain's national history? This is GB News, and we are the coronation. We're going to be seeing a lot of big fan favourite Michael Cole here, the royal commentator and reporter and author and expert, etc., etc., etc. As we rattle through the final hour of this show, I'm also going to be talking to a fan favourite here, an absolute fan favourite, a lady who has made her way down. She had her bags packed weeks ago. She's already camping out over there. It's Anita. Regular viewers will know exactly who I mean. If not, stay tuned because you're in for a treat. So we've got all of that and some of the more controversial elements as well. Talk of a slimmed down monarchy. Has Princess Anne gone a little bit rogue as she decided to slap down Charles and the woke brigade as well? She's been speaking a lot of common sense. Look, there's loads for us to do, as well as some non-royal news as well, but whisper it quietly because of where we are. Now, though, headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. And the top story this hour, more than 1 million NHS staff in England will receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be implemented. Members of the NHS Staff Council said that the unions agreed to the deal for staff, which includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. The Royal College of Nursing and Unite, however, voted against the pay deal. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers and is urging the remaining unions to accept the offer.
It's a good day for NHS staff, but it's also a good day for patients. It will allow us to move forward. Now the NHS Staff Council has ratified this deal. It's been accepted by the majority of the NHS Staff Council, and we can now move forward, focus together on the patients, and also ensure that staff get their pay rise much sooner than would have been the case under the pay review body process.
Steve Barclay. Well, the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the issue still isn't resolved.
Well, what this shows is that this whole load of industrial action was absolutely avoidable if the government had have done what Labour said should have happened months ago, and that is get round the table and negotiate. But it is also a sign of how angry nurses and indeed junior doctors are with this government, that the threat of industrial action continues even after today.
Meanwhile, a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others gave emotional testimony during her first time in the witness stand today. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court for the offences alleged to have taken place between June 2015 and June 2016. When asked by her defence lawyer if she'd intentionally done anything to hurt or kill the babies at the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital, she denied it. Former US President Donald Trump is in Scotland visiting one of his golf resorts. Yesterday, he opened a new course named after his late mother at Meany Estate near Aberdeen. His trip coincides with a visit to the UK last week by one of his likely rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, Ron DeSantis. And tomorrow night, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage interviews Donald Trump from his golf estate in Turnberry, Scotland. Watch it here on GB News at 7 o'clock. Now, teachers across England are striking today in an ongoing dispute over pay, with hundreds marching outside the Department for Education. In April, members of the National Education Union overwhelmingly rejected a pay offer. The NEU, along with 3 other teaching unions, has rejected the offer, which included a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.3% pay rise for most staff by September. Today's walkout is the 5th undertaken by educators this year, causing major disruption. Labour MP for Leeds East, Richard Bergen, says striking is always a last resort.
What we're seeing is people fighting back because they've got no choice. And there are ways to fund this. For example, just equalising capital gains tax with income tax, which used to be the case even for a period under Thatcher's government in the 80s, would raise more than enough money to give every single public sector worker in this country an inflation-matching pay rise. So the money is there. The government doesn't seem to have the right priorities because the government should be putting our public services and working people across this country first, and I'm afraid they're not.
Business news, and the oil giant BP is reporting stronger than expected profits in the first 3 months of this year, reaching close to £4 billion. The result was a reduction from the £4.96 billion that BP made in the same quarter last year, but well ahead of the £3.44 billion that analysts had expected it to make. Now, as you've been hearing, Princess Anne says she believes King Charles will not be changed by his new role as monarch. Talking with the Canadian broadcaster CBC ahead of His Majesty's coronation, Princess Anne said the King, like the rest of the family, is committed to public service. But the Princess Royal argued that slimming down the royal family didn't sound to her like a good idea. In response to reports, the King may reduce the number of working royals.
Well, you know what you're getting because he's been practising for a bit. And I don't think he'll change. You know, he is committed of his own level of service, and that will remain true.
King Charles's coronation is expected to provide a £120 million boost to pubs across the UK. The British Beer and Pub Association says local pubs and breweries are planning to pour 62 million pints over the bank holiday weekend, and pubs will be allowed to stay open until 1 o'clock in the morning. And just lastly, the King and Queen Consort have met with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer today. A reception was held at the Palace of Westminster ahead of the coronation, along with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. We can also see the monarch met with other members of Parliament as well. You're with GB News. More news as it happens now. Back to Patrick.
Wow, preparations for all the pomp and pageantry that a coronation deserves are well and truly underway. And in fact, some eagle-eyed viewers might be able to just see that they are removing some of the traffic lights behind me now as they prepare for the procession on the big day on Saturday. But the King has his own special agenda to build up to the big day. Now, earlier today, he met with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer in Westminster Hall. And I am told that we can go now to GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, what's been happening today?
Hello, Patrick. Yes, well, the King has been inside Westminster Hall, which was the historical room where these big coronation banquets used to happen. They have been seen as outdated and haven't happened for a number of coronations now. But nonetheless, the King and Queen Consorts were in that building meeting, as you said, the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, but also MPs and politicians, which Buckingham Palace describe as having shared interests with the monarch. Now, that is talking about the environment, sustainability and agriculture for the King, and for the Queen Consort, talking to MPs who do work with tackling of domestic violence, as well as literacy, particularly children's literacy, as well. So it was a pretty special event, perhaps, for members of Parliament, most of which will not be in Westminster Abbey for the coronation service itself. So it was their chance to, you know, shake hands with the King and Queen Consort ahead of their big day. There was also an old carriage on display, the Speaker's state coach, which used to be used during coronation ceremonies, but it's seen as too old and is in retirement. So it was there for display purposes only, but nonetheless, I think that shows the history and the continuity of the monarchy.
Absolutely, Cameron. Thank you very much. Cameron Walker, our royal reporter. Well, let's just get now to a big interview with Princess Anne. For many people as well, she's the favourite royal. She said that the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy isn't a good idea. She was reacting to reports that King Charles III could reduce the number of working royals, which I think is fascinating. Let's just hear what she has to say, and then we'll react to it with the one and only Michael Cole.
Oh, I think the slim down was said in a day when there were a few more people around to make that seem like a justifiable comment.
The world changes a bit.
It changes a bit. I mean, it doesn't sound like a good idea from where I'm standing, I have to say.
I'm sure it does
I'm not
not.
quite sure what else, you know, we can do.
Yes, well, I am joined now by the former royal correspondent Michael Cole, who's sitting with me here. Michael, just before we get stuck into that, what's going on behind us? We've got all these cranes that are ripping the traffic lights out of the road.
Amazing. I tell you, Patrick, the excitement is growing, and that's very largely due to Cameron and you and GB News, because you are the coronation station and you're helping to build this up in the best possible way. And I think that what you're doing here is going to make you even more central to the life of this country. and the ordinary people whose voices are rarely heard, if at all, and then grudgingly. So I think this is very, very important. And what is happening out here is that they're clearing away the great state, beautiful parade ground of the Mall, clearing away all the street furniture. I don't know, have you had a look at the Mall?
Yes, I've been
and
up and down
and
it.
you've noticed that it's red.
Yes.
Do you know why it's red?
No.
Because they mix rubber with the tarmac so that the horses don't slip if it's wet. That's why it's red. Nothing to do with it being royal.
No.
Now, on Coronation Day,
yes,
it may be wet, so maybe that will come into
Well, I hope
effect.
not. I've been trying to look at our little shelter here, and by the way, I would urge anybody to come down and have a look at the setup that we've got here at GB News. And we can, you never know, we might put you on the telly as well. We had a few, victims, I like to call them, earlier on when I was out and about on my Vox Pops that I was talking to. So yeah, get yourselves down if you want to be a part of our coverage. But let's have a little.
Let's go back to Anne. If
Yes,
you want
exactly.
to. Anne. Well, when they were kids, Anne and Charles didn't get on terribly well.
Oh, really?
Quite a lot of friction because he perceived that she was the favourite of her father, of the Duke of Edinburgh, which was true, and that caused a little bit of resentment. They've got on a lot better since, so she is firing a little shot across his bows in naval terminology. He'll understand that, to say, yeah, hang on, I'm here, I've got an opinion about this. But what I think, and it's important, the King is doing the right thing. He's responding to the times, the straitened circumstances of a lot of people, and he wants to concentrate on the direct line of succession. He wants to cut away a lot of the extraneous stuff, and he feels that is in tune with the times, and I think he's absolutely right. And what he's doing is essentially channeling his grandfather, King George VI, and he said that the royal family was best, in his opinion, when it was just us four.
But will it be saving us money, Michael? Because this is one of the things that a lot of people think. If you streamline the royal family, presumably you let some people go, you have fewer working royals. Does that save people like you and I money?
There are more than 200 nation states in the world. Nearly all of them have a head of state. It's expensive to maintain one. The cost of the British royal family compared with the American presidency is a tiny amount, an absolute fraction. Yes. If you are going to have a royal family, they have to be kept up in a certain dignity. But most of the money that comes from the public purse goes essentially to pay salaries. That's what it goes for. It doesn't go into the King's back pocket. It doesn't go to enrich him. He only owns two properties personally, and that's Balmoral Castle in Scotland and the Norfolk estate of Sandringham. So that's not a profit centre for him. What he's doing is his job, and if you have a royal family, you have to support them, and that's what the sovereign grant from Parliament is for.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually, it's really interesting on that point that you were talking about there, about what it would mean in terms of the public cost and in relation to the American presidential system. I was reading earlier on before I came on air that apparently our coronation here now is going to cost us somewhere in the region of £150,000 and £250,000, whilst in return bringing us something like £1 billion. These are all the estimates. Very hard to put an accurate figure on it, of course. However, if you look at what went on with President Donald Trump's inauguration, that cost around $350 million. So actually, realistically, when you look at it, I suppose the argument would be that he's elected and the royals are not, but there we go. Look, I went out and about earlier on. I didn't have to travel that far, actually. It was just behind me here, past these wonderful flowers here that we can see. And I was chatting to some fabulous
tulips.
people. They
Tulips.
are tulips, yes. I nearly said poppies, but thank you. You know, it's not just royals he's an expert on, this guy. He does a lot. Yeah, watch out Alan Titchmarsh. But anyway, and I was chatting to some lovely members of the public about whether or not they thought that the royal family should have been streamlined in light of Princess Anne's comments. Let's hear them.
The way things are going on in this country at the moment, with money and people losing their jobs and their homes of no fault of their own. So, and then they see all this, it's like they're going to find a little bit bitter, aren't they?
Great.
It depends what you mean by slimming down. I mean, haven't they slimmed down already a bit? I'm really not. I don't live here. I'm from New Zealand.
Yes.
So
well, welcome.
Thank
So
you,
what Princess Anne says is that we've already slimmed it down enough. There are fewer hangers-on, and she doesn't really see that we could be doing any more than we are.
Well, if there are a few hangers-on, and I don't know who they are, but yeah, trim them.
Do you think it would maybe make the royal family more relatable in the modern world, and if they cost us less money?
Yes. Yes. But I do believe, hasn't he sort of trimmed back the coronation to cost less?
Yeah.
So making an effort, but I mean they exist, so it's going to cost a bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to cost a certain amount.
So what would you say to people who think that we should be cutting the cost of the royal family, the taxpayer shouldn't be paying for them at all?
No, I think that what they do for our country, which is huge ambassadors worldwide, more than pays its own way for our country. And I think I'm a taxpayer, and I'm very happy for our taxes to be going for the royal family.
Would you pay even more?
No. I pay quite enough, thank you very much.
There you go. She already thinks she pays more than enough tax. Yeah, you and me both, love. There we go. But let's turn now to another one of the major talking points ahead of the coronation, and that is, will the Princess of Wales wear a tiara on Saturday, a proper one, all right, one with jewels in it, or an expensive one, a priceless one, or will she go for a floral headpiece instead? Now, it's been reported that Kate could decide to wear a crown of flowers instead of a tiara, which will be a major break with tradition. GBNews viewers can see two images of Kate there. One on the left, she's got the fancy tiara on. One on the right, no, she's not. It's the flowers. Michael Cole is absolutely adamant that he's got a. You've got points to make about the flowers.
I was going to say, whatever she wears, it will be right and it will be beautiful, because she very, very rarely puts a foot wrong. She looks great. She's a great advertisement for this country. She's produced 3 beautiful children who I understand, on good authority, are being brought up in a refreshingly normal way. And, you know, you've got Prince George, total Spencer, the other two, Charlotte and Louis, very Middleton. And happy birthday today to Princess Charlotte.
Yes.
She's 8 years old today. Happy birthday to her. So a big week for her, a big week for the country. And of course, if this idea of a floral coronet comes to fruition, and we don't know, we are speculating, it will then necessarily become part of the crown jewels, because it will then be displayed.
No.
Well, it must be, because if she wears it to a coronation, willy-nilly it will become not just a floral display, it will be something that will be put in
that? We've got
museum.
the Koh-i-Noor diamond here, we've got all of these things. There's some flowers.
Well, of course, that's an artist's impression. This is quite a nice mocked-up one.
It is,
nice,
yes. It's one for the
but she
Solomon
looks
Islands,
great. And interestingly, you know, opinion polls, they can be made to lie, of course, but opinion polls are giving the Waleses, as we must now call them, Kate and William, well over 70% approval rating. And that's going around the world. And, of course, that's the next generation, which proves, I think, that Anne is slightly wrong here, that the King is absolutely right. Concentrate on the direct line of succession.
I think with that, though, it's a bit of a, like you said, a shot across the bows from Anne, who is the hardest working royal, quotes unquote, the hardest working royal, something like 240 odd engagements last year alone, which is a heck of a lot, let's be honest. So there you go. Well, you know what I really hope there, Michael? I really hope that she's not choosing not to wear a fancy bejewelled tiara, just in case the optics of it might look bad and people might think, oh, well, you're not really down with normal people. She's gone for the flowers just purely because then people can go, oh, look how in touch with the big green agenda they are and stuff. You know, I hope she's not made the decision based on that.
Yeah, well, we're only just past May Day. Some lovely flowers are coming into flower at this moment. I think it's a really rather lovely idea if it chimes with what she believes in. And if you remember that rather remarkable invitation, I'm sure you got one to the coronation.
Yeah,
okay, it featured the Green Man, which I always thought was the name of a lot of pubs around the country.
Well, I thought it was the guy on the front of the old sweet corn tin, but apparently not.
That's the Jolly Green Giant. I think you're getting mixed up. But I think if she wore that, first of all, it would be a beautiful talking point. The fashion editors could dine out on it for several weeks, and it would look great. If she doesn't feel comfortable wearing a heavy jewelled crown, you know, the focus is going to be on the King and Queen Camilla. I mean, the King wears 3 different crowns during the coronation ceremony. He's got a choice, like we have of ties, you know, 3 ties. He's got 3 crowns that day, so let the focus be there. and that's where it should be. But whatever she does, she looks great.
She does, and actually, you're absolutely right. And if we do get wind, and it's definitely going to be happening with the floral headpieces, you know what's going to be happening up and down the Mall?
They'll be wearing them.
Every single person's going to be wearing them. Yeah, I might even get one on. Anyway, right, it's quite enough of that, I think, isn't it? Some of the royal family's most devoted followers are already camping outside Buckingham Palace. We are very nearly at the moment that I certainly have been waiting for since I came on air today. I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to talk with one of the biggest royal fans, super fans in the country. She's made her way down. She's standing just somewhere over there, just behind the camera over there now. It's Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a fabulous evening, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here at Buckingham Palace, and the sun has come out for us. It's been a bit on and off all day, but we're well and truly basking in it now, which is fantastic. So thank you very much for tuning in as we build up, of course, to one of the most important days in our national calendar, in our national history. It's King Charles's coronation on Saturday. But as most people across the country are planning street parties and gatherings and getting their quiches out of the oven to celebrate the King's coronation, police officers and security services are preparing the largest security operation since the late Queen's funeral last September. And one thing I will say was there weren't really any of them dusted around here yesterday, but today the scale of the police operation is vast. It's really stepped up a level. Operation Golden Orb, it's called, has already been underway for weeks, but with the authorities vetting so-called royal obsessives to try and identify anyone who could disrupt the festivities. Of particular concern are environmental protest groups. So they're not the old royal superfans or, you know, obsessives, which I think is a bit mean. No, these are, you know, well, your old classics Just Stop Oil, aren't they? Those numpties are back at it. But they've been increasingly active in recent months. And police will use intelligence on the most prevalent activists to prevent them from causing trouble. Joining me now is former head of Royal Protection. It's Di Davies. Di, thank you very much. Now, I think there's very much two different things going on here, possibly more actually. The first one is these so-called royal obsessives. Is that a little bit mean on those lovely people who I've met who were camping out there for days?
No, I wouldn't regard them as obsessives in the way that I would consider obsessives. They're the people who are mentally ill, who have a fixation. And it can vary from thinking they ought to be part of the royal family to they should have been married, etc., etc. They are the real ones, and they've been around for years, both in this country and abroad. And there is the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, who allegedly came out. There are about 200 that they're really concerned with, and about 10% of those could pose a danger. So they're the people that the police and others will be looking out for to ensure that if they're anywhere near, they're either escorted away or appropriate action taken.
Okay, now the police obviously do a lot of due diligence, don't they? And they're apparently monitoring several thousand people very, very closely in the run-up to all of this. So can't they preemptively act when it comes to Just Stop Oil? I was watching Dan Wootton's fantastic show last night, and indeed everybody should, 9 to 11 right here on GB News. And there was an individual on there, a lady, who said that she would preemptively lock up known members of Just Stop Oil and essentially put them under house arrest for the event. I don't think there'd be a lot of opposition to that, Di.
Well, you're right. And in case of football hooligans, they do actually do that, or they take out orders against them. I'm not aware, as far as public order, that there is a precedent for doing that. I think if you have the evidence that they are going to cause a breach of the peace, and don't forget, a breach of peace is always available to police, they should consider all their available legal options. But I emphasize the word legal. It has to be legal. But no, if they cause disruption, they should be swiftly removed. And if at all possible, shouldn't be allowed anywhere near the procession, because this is the King's Day. It's the country's day as well. And I don't think a very tiny minority, for whatever reasons they have, should be allowed to spoil it and spoil the image across the world, because there will be billions watching this. I mean, the Met Police have whatever else they don't do right these days. They certainly normally get these things spot on, and I was very proud of the late Queen's funeral and how all the services there. And we mustn't forget, this is a combined factor between the military, the police, the intelligence, the Mayor of London and his teams. There's a huge operation that has been going on for months, not weeks.
Absolutely, Dan. Now, part of Operation Golden Orb, as it's been called, we'll see, you know, snipers on the roof. It will see people embedding themselves into crowds. And one of the big concerns at any event like this is going to be the density of crowds and, frankly, not being able to know exactly who is in those crowds, and whether it's your kind of just out-and-out terrorist, whether it's some Just Stop Oil nutter, or whoever it is, a royal obsessive, whatever. Okay, it's very difficult for the authorities to actually tell. So talk me through some of the tactics that you use. I mean, are we talking CCTV? How are we talking? What's high-tech about it all? What goes on?
Well, again, you've answered to some degree your own question, in the fact, yes, there will be CCTV. Yes, there will be monitoring. And I'm an old public order. I used to do a lot of public order and capture the ground early. As you can see now, the police are actually ensuring key areas are protected and have been protected for some time. I'd be looking at where I would consider are the pinch points. One of the key things, as well as protecting the royals and the VIPs and everybody else, is protecting the public. And what you have to have are contingency plans, so that in the event of any untoward incident, you can react quickly and safeguard, because what happens in any large event, might, if there was one, is panic. So what you have to do is consider how you evacuate. How would you deal with a major incident? And I've no doubt there are a number of contingency plans, and that is key, because if you fail to prepare, you will fail. So preparation is key. Knowing your ground is good, and in my case, I always say, know your history. Know what has happened previously in royal events, and I can take you back to 1760 if you really want, as to the events and how George III was attacked. Then you have Queen Victoria. You've had royals being attacked throughout the centuries, so you've got to know how and where, not only in this country, but in Holland, where the royal family were attacked by a guy in a car. So you've got to know all of these things and then put them into the strategies of today.
Absolutely. Look, Di, thank you very, very much. Di Davies, there is former head of Royal Protection, just giving you a little bit of a flavour of security. Definitely, notably, actually ramps up here. It was a vast difference between the level of security today to there was yesterday. That's only going to increase, of course, as the week rumbles on here outside Buckingham Palace as we build up to the coronation. Loads more to come on the coronation there, but in a moment we will hear, I promise you, from a woman who's got more than 13,000 bits of royal memorabilia. So there we go, and she's here, okay, she is here, she's made her way down here, she's camping out, so we're going to be talking to a fan favourite here at GB News, Anita. But it's not just royal news as well, I'm going to be talking about lots more. First though, it is your latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. And the top stories this hour: more than 1 million NHS staff in England will receive a 5% pay rise. Health unions representing the majority of NHS workers have recommended that a revised pay offer made by the government should be implemented. Members of the NHS Staff Council said that the unions agreed to the deal for staff, which includes all NHS workers apart from doctors, dentists and senior managers. The Royal College of Nursing and Unite, however, voted against the pay deal. Health Secretary Steve Barclay says the government will implement the pay rise for NHS workers and is urging the remaining unions to accept the offer. Meanwhile, a nurse accused of murdering 7 babies and attempting to kill 10 others has appeared in the witness stand for the first time. 33-year-old Lucy Letby is on trial at Manchester Crown Court for the offences alleged to have taken place between 2015 and 2016, when she was asked by her defence lawyer if she had intentionally done anything to kill or hurt the babies at the neonatal unit of the Countess of Chester Hospital. She said no. Former US President Donald Trump is in Scotland at one of his golf resorts. Yesterday, he owned a new course named after his late mother near Aberdeen. His trip coincides with the visit to the UK last week by one of his likely rivals for the 2024 Republican nomination, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And tomorrow night here on GB News, in a world exclusive, Nigel Farage will be interviewing Donald Trump from his golf estate in Turnberry in Scotland. That's here on GB News tomorrow at 7 p.m. The King and Queen Consort have met with Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer. A reception was held at the Palace of Westminster ahead of His Majesty's coronation. Along with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, the monarch also met with other members of Parliament. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And a quick snapshot for you of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2471 and €1.1341 euros. The price of gold is £1,617 and 67 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed today down at 7,773 points.
So, OK, I have seen people who properly love our royal family gathering just over there, actually, on the Mall, but they'll be gathering over the last couple of days. There's a few people here, wonderful people as well, just occasionally shouting at me, mostly nice things, as they gather outside Buckingham Palace. But I am sure that there are many more to come in the run-up to Saturday's festivities. My GB News colleague, Theo Chicomba, has met up with 2 absolute superfans who are already here. And by the way, I think you'll recognise one of these. Take it away, Theo.
I had the pleasure of meeting Anita and our friend Donna at Prince William and Kate's wedding, and they were very kind enough to let me join their little group, and we've been friends ever since.
And how's that friendship been, meeting people in the most of
Be
random
honest.
places?
Oh man, it's great. And you know, MJ, we call her MJ. She lives at one end of the country and I live at the other, and we don't meet very often, but just at royal occasions, and it's great. It's good to have people who kind of understand and get it, what being a monarchist is all about.
And for you, this week is a big week. Tell me why you've come a few days in advance to get a good spot, and how much you're looking forward to this weekend.
I think it's important for me to be here because I want to show King Charles III that we're going to continue to support him and be there for him in just the same way we were for the late Queen.
And for you, what were you looking forward to especially this weekend?
I want to see the Golden Coach in action. I can't wait to see the Golden Coach in action. And it doesn't matter where you are, you'll be able to see it. It's about the size of a double-decker bus, isn't it? We really just want to see that. I've read all about it. I've seen it in books and old Coronation books, because it doesn't come out very often. And yeah, this is once in a lifetime for me to see the Golden Coach. But we met in 2011 at Kate and William's wedding, and that was when we were allowed to camp outside of Westminster Abbey. And we've been to Windsor to the Queen's birthdays on occasions, especially the 90th birthday as well. And we were both here last year for the Queen's funeral, but we couldn't meet because of the volume of people. We couldn't get to each other, could we?
No.
It was just mad, and it's going to be even madder on Saturday. So don't go anywhere.
No, I'm staying put. Now my tent's up, that's it, I'm going nowhere.
On that, you've arrived, you've pitched your tent up. Are you looking forward to those cold nights, or is this all worth it?
I don't know why people go on about cold nights and is it worth it. Personally, I've never been cold. Last year, the cafe very kindly saved me some cardboard because I thought, hang on, homeless people sleep on cardboard. That's a good tip. So they saved me some cardboard, but this year I've got really posh and I've got a roll mat and a new sleeping bag.
Ooh.
I've gone up market. It is my 70th birthday this year, so I decided to treat myself.
Brilliant. And last one to you. How much does the royal family mean to you, and how important is it for people to come together and be unified?
Well, I'm a monarchist, so, you know, and I've been a monarchist, well, as long as I can remember. And that's what I am. That's my politics, if you like. And I would defend a monarchy with my last breath. I certainly would. I've studied the history of it for 45 years, and I know why I'm a monarchist. To me, the monarchy represents freedom. It's why I'm camping here in London, because I want to, because I'm free to do that in my country.
Oh, well, there we go. Fantastic to see Anita and her mate now. I've interviewed Anita several times, so to know that she's just around the corner there is great. Look, Michael Cole's still with me, the big royal expert himself. Now, Michael, you've had some interactions with people a bit like Anita, haven't you?
Yeah, when we used to go around the world on royal events, we had a name for these lovely people, and we called them the twirlies, because whether it was New Zealand, Australia, the West Indies, wherever you went, you'd go to a royal event and there'd be two lovely ladies like Anita, and they'd say to us, "Are we too early? Are we too early?"
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how things have changed. You know, the royal walkabout, which is standard now, was tried out, first of all, in Australia. That's why it's called a walkabout, okay? And the very first one was after the Queen's Thanksgiving service for her Silver Jubilee, 1977, outside St Paul's Cathedral. The Queen wore a lovely, beautiful pink coat and hat, and she went and met the people. First time. That's only 45 years ago. That's how things have changed.
I just love it so much. And we talk a lot about the protesters and all of this stuff. I just hope they don't ruin it for those people. This is like the biggest thing in their lives.
There's always selfish people who want to impose themselves on us. I just wish they'd give us a break.
Yeah.
It is unkind. And do they think that they are the only people who care about the planet because we care about the planet?
Well, they're ego warriors as much as eco warriors, aren't they?
They're ego warriors. They're selfish, and they are complacent, and they think that they are more important than anybody else.
Well, next time, say what you really think, Michael. OK, next time, say what you really think. Now, look, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't just about the royal news today, and I do have some very serious news to be bringing you very, very shortly. So it's definitely a shift in tone, this, ladies and gentlemen. But former nurse Lucy Letby has taken the stand to give evidence at Manchester Crown Court for the first time today. The 33-year-old is accused of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of a further 10 babies whilst working at the Countess of Chester Hospital between 2015 and 2016. Now, she denies all of the charges, but this is just an absolutely horrific case. Our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, is at the court for us today. And Sophie, what more can you tell us about what's been going on today?
Well, this afternoon, Benjamin Myers, KC of the defence, has begun questioning Lucy Letby about various aspects of the house she was living in at the time of her arrest. Now, the former nurse sat in the witness box, sobbed as she was shown images of her home, things like her cuddly toys spread out on her bed and a notice board in her kitchen which had pictures and cards from family attached to it, one of which described her as #1 godmother. The defence then moved on to question the former nurse about various other pieces of paper that were found by police in the property. On one of the notes, she'd named a set of triplets, 2 of whom she's alleged to have murdered in June of 2016. Under the names, she'd written, "Today is your birthday, but you aren't here, and I am so sorry for that. I'm sorry that you couldn't have a chance at the life you should have, and the pain that your parents must experience every day." She followed that by writing, "We tried our best and it wasn't enough." Now, she explained that this was a reference to the team at the Countess of Chester Hospital who'd attempted to save the lives of those babies but had been unable to do so. Now, court has finished for the day here in Manchester, but we're expecting it to resume once again on Friday.
Sophie, thank you very much. Sophie Reaper there, who's outside Manchester Crown Court for us, and is bringing us bang up to date on what is just one of the most, how do I phrase this, concerning cases and emotionally involved cases I think that it's possible to have, and we'll continue to be right up to date with that as it progresses. But moving away from that for now, and there is actually some good news for King Charles ahead of Saturday's coronation. Yes, that's right, some good news. He's getting more and more popular, apparently, with the British public. And I'm Patrick Christys, right here on GB News, and we, of course, are Britain's news channel, the home of coronation coverage.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Now, a little earlier on in the show, we heard from royal superfan Anita Atkinson, who is camping out just over there. More than 13,000 pieces of royal memorabilia she's got, and she's got the chance to buy lots more bits and bobs this week. Shops up and down the country are filled with keepsakes, from the Coronation mugs to Union Jack flags, etc, 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 novelty crowns, bunting. Our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, has actually taken a little look at how some businesses are preparing for some much-needed trade.
From badges to bunting, we love to go all out for a special occasion, and the Coronation this weekend is no exception. But it's not just putting on a big party. According to the Centre for Retail Research, we're estimated to spend nearly £246 million on souvenirs and memorabilia.
We've got some locations that go with our trails, we've got celebrations.
In Lichfield, the Paw Print family have worked with the Eden Project communities to create commemorative badges for the big Coronation lunch. Owner Charlotte Russell says there'll be a way to reconnect with memories in the future.
So we know that people love a celebration and we know that they love a commemorative badge, so anything with a date on, people absolutely love. We get them out and we look at them and we remember the things that we've done, and I think it's bringing back those memories that people love. They can look at one thing and it suddenly brings back a day or a week or that whole adventure and experience, and they remember the things they ate, the people they were with, and yeah, it's just that real sort of memory.
Now, when it comes to the big lunch, our Coronation spend on food and party items could reach more than £134 million. But if you're going to make a Coronation quiche, you've got to have a plate to eat it off. In the pottery capital of Stoke-on-Trent, staff at Emma Bridgewater have long begun work on plates, a teapot and a half-pint mug to mark the historic moment. Head of production Stephen Beeston says they're expecting a big demand.
Probably, if history is anything to go by with the events that we marked before, then it will account for a big part of what we're doing. The pottery industry have got this long-standing proud tradition of producing commemorative ware that goes back probably the mid-17th century. So, yeah, it's just something that we have the heritage here, we have the expertise, and we're very proud to be associated with the royal family.
Whether it's coins or quiches, people across the United Kingdom are all wanting a slice of the Coronation fun for the crowning of King Charles III. Jack Carson, GB News.
Now, as the Coronation approaches, King Charles is, of course, gearing up for it, isn't he? He's benefiting from a boost in his approval ratings, and a new poll shows that increasing support for King Charles has risen to 62%. And 62% of people believe that he will be good for the monarchy. Now, last year, only 39% believed that he would be a good king. So we went out and about getting the thoughts of people from Nottinghamshire on the royal family and the new king as the Coronation fast approaches. Let's have a little listen to what the fair people of Nottingham had to say.
I used to be in favour of the royal family. I was quite a royalist, but times have changed now, I think, and although they do bring a lot of revenue into the country, they're still old dinosaurs now, and I think we need to move on. But what the alternative is, I do not know.
I am totally opposed to the monarchy, always have been. The reason being, it's a total waste of money. They don't do anything for the country. They don't bring in half the tourism that they make out they do, and that people make out they do. And in this day and age, when there's a cost of living crisis, you've got people sleeping on the streets that I've just walked past and gave one of them a pound, and you've got people visiting food banks, and they've got them living in utter luxury off the fat of the land, and we, the taxpayer, are paying for it.
Yeah, I think he'd be a really good king. He's had a good role model. I mean, I don't know a single person who doesn't like the Queen, to be honest. But yeah, I think he's done some really good work for the environment and charity work. I think I think he'd make a really good king.
The new guys coming, the princes, I don't know if they're going to maybe do things differently. It's kind of outdated in the reality of it when you say you've got like poor people struggling, you've got people living in massive mansions and getting so much and whatever. So, but I'm like on the fence, really.
No, I'm a Republican. I've got no tact with the monarchy whatsoever. Total waste of money.
All right, well, yes, there we go. So it's good news, isn't it? Good news for people and King Charles as well. His popularity ratings are surging. Now, people might have got a little sneak peek a moment ago there. I'm going to hold fire a second because Michelle Dewberry is with me, but we're just getting the finishing touches set up for her. Is she there?
Yes.
You there? Yeah, there we go. All right, Michelle, what have you got coming up on your show?
It's not the most technical introduction you've ever seen, the technically swift introduction you've ever seen, because I am holding my own microphone, but I just was so dying to get on and talk to you that I just couldn't wait outside. How
good is this, by the way?
I was just about to say, what a treat. Look at us, everybody. And please do excuse my hair and holding my own microphone, but, you know, this is live TV, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look at this. I'm pinching myself, actually. Girl from the north, sitting here outside Buckingham Palace in advance of the King's coronation. Are you a massive royalist, though? Are you into it all?
Yeah, I am. And actually, to be honest with you, I have, I think understandably so, got a lot more into it in the last 48 hours I've been sitting here.
Well, that's what I mean, because for me, you know, I would never have described myself as a huge royalist, but when you come here, you absolutely get swept up by the wonderful atmosphere, experience. It feels brilliant, doesn't it?
You know what I think? I'm just going around and speaking to people, and I actually love it, because I get off the tube just around the corner and I walk through Green Park, which is fantastic, and you walk down the Mall and then you get here and you mingle with people over there, and just how much joy this brings to so many people.
What, your presence?
Not my presence. Well, both actually, Michelle. I'm very, very big in the 80-plus female demographic. So there you go. I can tell you that much. Yeah, they are not backwards about coming forwards either, that lot. But there we go. So, but I think realistically though, this is like, it's just such a special occasion, such a special time for a lot of people. Other countries don't have this.
No, they do not. And I'm looking forward to my show tonight, because I will get into this whole monarchy thing. I want to talk about whether or not it should be slimmed down and who's your favourite member of the royal family. But there's also other important matters to attend to. I want to get into windfall tax.
Yeah.
The whole thing about university, should you have to pay fees or not. I also want to get into that and lots more. It's got loads coming up. I'm even going to brush my hair as well before my show.
No, you look wonderful. Don't worry about that. I've massively shifted on the windfall tax, I think, because...
Why?
Well, initially I was like, well, no, this is ridiculous. It's just business, and global circumstances, you know, account for all of this stuff. I just can't help but feel as though something has to be done a little bit now, and I'm like, I think they're taking the, you know.
Who was taking the?
Companies like BP, £4 billion, and it's great. No. I'm not going all. I know. I'm not going all lefty and all of that.
They're taxed at about 75% on some of these profits in this country. What more do people want? What 99% of the profit? Hey, never mind 99. Let's go 100.
But are they artificially inflating prices though? That's the thing. Because then if they are, then that's pretty bad. Because a lot of companies are.
Well, you say that actually, and there's calls, isn't there, on the food side?
Food stuff.
Yeah, so people are saying about investigations into all of the supply chains when it comes to supermarkets. They defended themselves, saying, well, what you're seeing now is the prices that were negotiated ages ago trickling down to hit the consumers. But I am a capitalist, but I do kind of have a sneaky suspicion that some people are trying to reclaim.
I think they are.
And by the way, I don't know what people expect. Everyone was absolutely desperate to shut down the whole economy and the country for goodness knows how long.
I know.
So what is it you expect a lot of these businesses to do who had profit hit during that period?
Absolutely. Well, look, stay tuned. There's no need to go anywhere else. Keep your eyes peeled right here on GB News, because Michelle Dewberry in all her regal glory will be with you. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most of us will be dry for the next couple of days, but things are on the change as we head towards the weekend. turning more showery. We are going to replace high pressure with low pressure and weather fronts. But for the time being, this high is in control. It's brought quite a lot of cloud across the country today, but some places have been seeing some sunshine and not much rain. We do have a few light drizzly showers over parts of northern England, pushing up into central Scotland. We could see a little bit of light rain cross through Northern Ireland during the early hours. But for most, it'll be a dry, fine evening and a dry night. With some clearer spells, we may dip down into the mid-single figures, but further west, most places staying up at 9 or 10. On to Wednesday, and overall, another dry and probably a brighter day tomorrow. A bit more sunshine, certainly for England and Wales. Quite a bit of cloud at times through Scotland. There will be some outbreaks of rain, particularly in the west